The fluorescent lights of Sterling Grace Hospital buzzed like dying wasps at 4:47 a.m. when Dr. Maya Thornton, dressed in wrinkled scrubs that hadn't seen a washing machine in 36 hours, was told to sit on a bench outside the CEO's office and wait. And wait. And wait. The administrative assistant didn't offer water, didn't offer an explanation, just a cold smile and a gesture toward the metal bench bolted to the wall like furniture in a prison visiting room. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Security guards changed shifts, glancing at her with the kind of indifference reserved for broken equipment waiting to be hauled away. At 8:15 a.m., black Chevy Suburbans with government plates pulled into the service entrance, silent as shadows, purposeful as executioners. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. But they should have. If you want to see how the mighty fall and justice rises from the coldest bench in the building, stay with me until the very end. Like this story, comment what city you're watching from, and let me see how far the truth can travel. Maya's back ached from the unforgiving bench, but she didn't move, didn't check her phone, didn't complain. She simply sat, hands folded in her lap, eyes tracking every person who passed through the executive corridor of Sterling Grace Hospital like she was cataloging faces for a lineup. And in a way, she was. A woman in a navy pantsuit clicked past on designer heels, her badge reading Director of Operations. She didn't glance at Maya. A maintenance worker pushed a yellow mop bucket down the hall, whistling tunelessly. He looked right through her. 2 residents in fresh white coats laughed about something as they headed toward the physician's lounge, their voices echoing off the marble floors that Sterling Grace had installed last year during a budget crisis that resulted in 3 rounds of nursing layoffs. Maya had read the financial reports, all of them. She knew exactly how much those floors cost. Still here? The administrative assistant, Brenda, according to her nameplate, peered over her computer screen with eyebrows raised in theatrical surprise. Mr. Garrison is extremely busy this morning. I'm not sure when he'll have time. I'll wait, Maya said quietly. Brenda's smile thinned. It could be all day. That's fine. The assistant's fingers paused over her keyboard, irritation flickering across her face before she returned to typing with aggressive precision. Maya had seen that look before. It was the look of someone who'd spent years wielding the small, cruel power of gatekeeping, someone who relished making people wait because it was the only control they'd ever have. The clock on the wall ticked toward 9. Then 9:30. The executive floor came alive with activity, phones ringing, elevator chimes, the rustle of expensive suits moving through expensive space. Nobody asked Maya if she needed anything. Nobody asked why she was there. At 10 a.m. sharp, the elevator opened and a man in his early 60s stepped out, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most nurses made in a month. Richard Garrison, CEO of Sterling Grace Hospital for the past 8 years. His face was all sharp angles and practiced charm, the kind of man who'd mastered the art of looking concerned while signing off on decisions that destroyed lives. He walked right past Maya without a glance, speaking into his phone about golf handicaps and investment portfolios. Brenda stood immediately, following him into his office with a tablet and an obsequious smile. The door closed. Maya waited. 15 minutes later, a woman emerged from the elevator carrying a coffee tray from the expensive shop across the street. 4 drinks, none of them for the person on the bench. She knocked on Garrison's door, was welcomed inside with warm greetings, more laughter. The door closed again. Maya's phone buzzed once in her pocket. She ignored it. At 10:45, Garrison's door finally opened. The coffee woman left, still laughing at something he'd said. Brenda emerged next, glancing at Maya with something between pity and contempt. Mr. Garrison can see you now. 5 minutes. Maya stood, her joints protesting after nearly 6 hours on the metal bench. She walked into the office with steady steps, taking in everything at once. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Riverside. The mahogany desk that could seat 8 for dinner. The wall of awards and photographs showing Garrison shaking hands with politicians and donors. Miss... He looked up from his computer, his expression one of polite confusion, as if he'd never been told she was waiting, as if she'd simply materialized in his doorway. Thornton. Maya Thornton. Right. He gestured vaguely at a chair. What can I do for you? I'm afraid I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. Maya sat, noting how he didn't apologize for the wait, didn't acknowledge it at all. I'm here about the nursing position, night shift, trauma unit. Ah. His attention was already drifting back to his screen. That goes through HR, 3rd floor. You'll need to... I've been through HR. I was told to report here at 5 a.m. for orientation. That was 6 hours ago. Garrison's eyes sharpened slightly, reassessing her. Orientation starts at 7. Someone gave you incorrect information. My offer letter says 5. Then your offer letter is wrong. He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all. But I'm sure we can sort this out. Why don't you head down to HR, speak with Carol, and... I spoke with Carol yesterday. She sent me here. The smile hardened. Miss Thornton, I don't know what kind of miscommunication has occurred, but I'm not the person who handles new hire issues. I run a hospital. I have board members arriving shortly for a quarterly review. If you have a problem with your paperwork, take it up with... I don't have a problem with paperwork. Maya's voice remained level, calm. I have a problem with being told to wait for 6 hours like I don't exist. Garrison stood, his patience clearly exhausted. I understand you're frustrated, but showing up unannounced to my office and making demands is not how things work here. If you want to work at Sterling Grace, I suggest you learn the proper channels. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm not asking to work here, Maya said, still seated. I already work here. Not if you can't follow basic protocol, you don't. He moved toward the door, opening it in a clear dismissal. Brenda will show you to HR. Maya stood slowly, meeting his eyes with an expression that made something flicker across his face, just for a moment, a shadow of uncertainty. Then it was gone, replaced by executive authority and the absolute certainty of a man who'd never been contradicted by someone in scrubs. One more thing, Maya said as she reached the doorway. When the board arrives, you might want to check the service entrance. I think you have visitors. Garrison frowned. What visitors? But Maya was already walking away, her footsteps quiet on the expensive marble, leaving him standing in his doorway, looking both annoyed and vaguely troubled in a way he couldn't quite articulate. She didn't go to HR, she went to the trauma unit. The charge nurse, a woman named Denise with 20 years of experience and eyes that had seen everything, looked up from the medication cart as Maya approached the nurse's station. You're the new girl, Denise said. Not a question. You're late. I was waiting upstairs. Waiting for what? A parade? Another nurse snorted from behind a computer screen. This is night shift, honey. We don't do red carpets. Maya clipped on her temporary badge and began reviewing the assignment board. 16 patients, 3 criticals, 2 fresh post-ops. The usual chaos of a level 2 trauma center in a city of 500,000 people. I need you on Bay 4, Denise said, handing over a tablet. 52-year-old male, status post-motorcycle accident, fractured ribs, possible internal bleeding. Vitals are stable, but watch him. Dr. Kim wants another CT in 2 hours. Maya took the tablet, scanning the chart with practiced efficiency. Hemoglobin? Dropped from 12 to 10.3. We're watching it. Abdominal exam? Soft, non-distended, but something's off. Kim thinks there might be a slow bleed we're not catching. Maya headed to Bay 4, pulling back the curtain to find a man lying very still, his face pale beneath road rash and bruising. His name was Marcus Webb, according to the chart. 42, not 52. Someone had transposed the numbers. Construction supervisor. No next of kin listed. Mr. Webb? She checked his IV line, noting the fluids running at 125 per hour. I'm Maya. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. His voice was rough, strained. Except it was the road. Pain level? 7. 8 when I breathe deep. She examined him carefully. Abdomen, chest, breath sounds. Everything Denise had said checked out. But Maya's instincts, honed over years of experience that nobody here knew about, told her the same thing Dr. Kim suspected. Something was bleeding. Slowly. Dangerously. I'm going to be checking on you every 30 minutes, she said, adjusting his oxygen. If anything changes, pain gets worse, you feel dizzy, anything, you call me immediately. Webb nodded, already drifting back toward the medication-induced haze that made the pain bearable. Maya returned to the nurses' station, logging her assessment. The other nurses ignored her, moving through their routines with the efficient indifference of people who'd seen too many new hires come and go to invest in introductions. Except for one. A young nurse, couldn't have been more than 25, approached with a shy smile. "I'm Tessa. I started 3 months ago. Everyone else has been here forever, so it's nice to have another new person." Maya. "I know. Denise told me you were supposed to start last week, but there was some issue with your paperwork?" "Something like that." Tessa lowered her voice. "Just a warning. Garrison's been on a rampage lately. 3 nurses got fired last month. He says it's about performance, but really it's about budget. He's been cutting corners everywhere, and when things go wrong, he blames the floor staff." Maya filed that information away. "Thanks for the heads up." The shift progressed with the controlled chaos typical of trauma nursing. A car accident victim arrived at 2 p.m., a teenage girl with a shattered femur and a punctured lung. Maya assisted with the intubation, her hands steady, her movements precise. "Doctor." Kim barely acknowledged her, barking orders that she anticipated before he finished speaking. At 4 p.m., she checked on Webb again. His blood pressure had dropped. Not dramatically, but enough to concern her. His hemoglobin was down to 9.1. "Dr. Kim." She caught him between patients. "Webb in Bay 4, I think we need that CT now." Kim glanced at the chart, frowning. "It's only been 3 hours." His pressure's dropping, hemoglobin's falling faster than it should with rib fractures alone. His abdomen's still soft, but his heart rate's climbing, compensating for volume loss. Kim studied her for a moment, clearly weighing whether to take advice from a nurse he'd just met. Then he nodded. "Call radiology. Get him down there in 15 minutes. The CT showed what Maya had suspected, a small splenic laceration bleeding into the abdominal cavity. Not fast enough to cause immediate crisis, but steady enough to kill him by morning if left untreated. Webb was in surgery within the hour. Dr. Kim found Maya at the nurses' station afterward. "Good catch," he said simply, then moved on to the next crisis. Denise overheard. "Where'd you train?" "Different places," Maya said, which was true enough. "You military?" Maya's hands paused over the keyboard for just a fraction of a second. "Used to be." Denise nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. "Thought so. You move like it." The shift ended at 7 p.m. Maya changed in the locker room, listening to other nurses complain about scheduling, about pay, about the new policy that required them to reuse supplies that were supposed to be single-use, about Garrison's latest memo threatening termination for anyone who spoke to the press about internal hospital matters. She walked out through the main entrance, past the gleaming lobby with its donor wall and its promise of excellence in patient care. The black Suburbans were gone from the service entrance, but she knew they hadn't gone far. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number that wasn't in her contacts. "Day 1 complete." "Anything?" Maya typed back. "Everything. Worse than the audit suggested." The response came immediately. "Timeline? Soon." She deleted both messages, walked to her car, a 10-year-old Honda that fit perfectly with the struggling nurse narrative, and drove to a small apartment in the kind of neighborhood where nobody asked questions and nobody remembered faces. Inside, she opened her laptop and began typing her report. Names, incidents, witnesses. The pattern of negligence and cost-cutting that had caught federal attention 6 months ago when a military contractor doing routine medical supply audits noticed irregularities in Sterling Grace's orders. Equipment purchased but never delivered. Medications signed for but never inventoried. Enough discrepancies to trigger an investigation. And when federal auditors started digging, they found something much bigger. Garrison had been systematically defrauding insurance companies, Medicare, and military medical contracts for years. Billing for procedures never performed, charging for equipment never used, running a network of phantom suppliers who existed only on paper. The money was staggering, and people had died because of corners cut to maintain the profit margins. Maya had been recruited specifically for this. Former Army trauma nurse. Medical intelligence background. No personal connections to Riverside that anyone could trace. She'd spent 3 months building a cover identity, complete with fabricated employment history and references that would check out under routine scrutiny. Getting hired had been easy. Sterling Grace was always desperate for night shift nurses. Nobody questioned a candidate willing to work the hours everyone else avoided. Now she just had to survive long enough to document everything. She worked until midnight, compiling her notes, cross-referencing them with the financial data the federal team had already gathered. Then she slept for 4 hours and returned to Sterling Grace for her second shift. Garrison was waiting in the trauma unit when she arrived. "Miss Thornton." His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "I need to speak with you." Denise glanced up from her charting, her expression carefully neutral. The other nurses found sudden reasons to be elsewhere. "My office," Garrison said. "Now." Maya followed him through the corridors, noting the security cameras, the exit routes, the positions of staff who might become witnesses. Garrison's office was exactly as she'd left it the day before, pristine, expensive, designed to intimidate. He closed the door. "I've been reviewing your file," he said, moving behind his desk like it was a barrier between them. "And I have some concerns." "About?" "Your references, for one. I called Dr. Patterson at County General. He says you worked there for 8 months, not 2 years like your resume claims." Maya had expected this. Patterson was part of the cover, but Garrison was supposed to have spoken to him a week ago during the hiring process. "Dr. Patterson supervised my residency rotation. The 2 years were at a different facility." "Which facility?" "Mercy General in Phoenix." "I called them too. They have no record of Maya Thornton." "Then they lost their records. It happens." Garrison's smile widened. "Or you're lying." Maya said nothing, letting the silence stretch between them. "Here's what I think," Garrison continued, leaning forward. "I think you're some kind of reporter, or a lawyer fishing for a malpractice case. Someone planted you here to dig up dirt. I'm a nurse. You're a problem, and I don't keep problems on my staff." He opened a folder on his desk, pulling out a termination letter already filled out except for the signature. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "On what grounds?" "Falsification of employment records. That's immediate termination under hospital policy. You can appeal to HR if you want, but I wouldn't bother. You'll lose." Maya stood slowly. "You're making a mistake." "No, Miss Thornton. You made the mistake. You thought you could walk into my hospital and play games. This is my city, my hospital, my rules." He pressed a button on his phone. "Brenda, send security to my office." 2 guards arrived within 90 seconds, both large, both armed with tasers and handcuffs, both wearing expressions of bored competence. Maya recognized one of them from her first day. He hadn't looked at her then either. "Escort Miss Thornton to her locker," Garrison instructed. "Make sure she collects her belongings and leaves the premises. If she returns, she's trespassing." The guards flanked her, not touching, but making their presence unmistakable. Maya walked between them through the corridor, past nurses who averted their eyes, past doctors who pretended not to notice. The walk of shame. Garrison's favorite power play, according to the complaints that had been filed with the state licensing board and subsequently buried. At her locker, Maya collected the few personal items she'd brought: a spare scrub top, a water bottle, a novel she'd never opened. The guards watched, making sure she didn't take anything that belonged to the hospital. Tessa appeared in the doorway, her face stricken. "Maya, what's happening?" "Don't," one of the guards said. "Move along." "But move along or you can join her." Tessa fled, tears already starting. Maya had seen her kind before, good hearts, crushed slowly by systems designed to break them. She'd probably quit within the year, leave healthcare entirely, become another casualty of executive greed and administrative cruelty. The guards walked Maya through the main entrance, past the donor wall, past the promise of excellence. It was 9 a.m. The lobby was full of visitors, patients, staff. All of them watched as she was escorted out like a criminal. At the door, the senior guard, his nameplate read Morrison, spoke for the first time. "You got somewhere to go?" "I'll manage." "Good luck finding another nursing job. Garrison blacklists people. You're done in this city." They left her on the sidewalk outside the main entrance, returning to their posts without a backward glance. Maya stood there for exactly 30 seconds, long enough for the security cameras to capture her looking defeated and lost. Then she walked to her car, drove 3 blocks, and parked behind a coffee shop where she pulled out her phone. "I'm burned," she texted the unnamed number. "He fired me." The response took 2 minutes. "Did you get what we need?" "Not yet. He's too careful. Everything's verbal, nothing documented. Then we go to contingency." "When?" tonight. Be ready." Maya deleted the messages and drove back to her apartment. She had 12 hours to prepare. 12 hours before everything Garrison had built came crashing down. She spent the time reviewing every note she'd taken, every conversation she'd documented, every suspicious incident she'd witnessed in 2 short shifts. It wasn't enough for a criminal case, not yet. But it was enough to establish pattern, enough to justify the next phase. At 8 p.m., she changed into fresh scrubs and drove back to Sterling Grace. Not to the main entrance, to the service bay where deliveries were made and where security coverage had a convenient blind spot that nobody had bothered to fix despite 3 incident reports filed over the past 2 years. She slipped inside, using the access code that should have been changed weekly but hadn't been changed in 6 months. The code was another violation, another cost-cutting measure that traded security for budget savings. The service corridors were empty, lit by fluorescence that flickered with every other breath. Maya moved through them like she belonged there, because technically she still did. Her badge wouldn't be deactivated until morning, another detail Garrison's efficient machine had overlooked. She made her way to the supply room on the 3rd floor, the one that required supervisory access. Her temporary badge shouldn't have worked, but it did, because Sterling Grace had never quite finished implementing the new security system they'd purchased 8 months ago. They'd paid for it, billed insurance for it, but never actually installed it. Inside, Maya photographed everything. Shelves that should have been full but were half empty. Equipment marked as quality controlled that still had manufacturing defects clearly visible. Medications stored at the wrong temperature. Surgical supplies dated from 5 years ago that should have been destroyed. She was downloading files from the inventory computer when the door opened behind her. Denise stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I thought that was you on the security feed." Maya's hand moved instinctively to her pocket, where her phone held evidence that couldn't be lost. "I left something in my locker." "Your locker's on the 2nd floor. This is supply." They stared at each other across the poorly lit room, years of nursing experience reading vital signs in human faces. "You're not a reporter," Denise said finally. "Reporters don't know how to check for splenic lacs." "No." "And you're not just some nurse with bad references." "No." Denise stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "So what are you?" "Someone who's trying to stop people from dying." "People are already dying. They've been dying for years. Why do you care now?" Maya gestured at the half-empty shelves. "Because it's about to get worse. Garrison's expanding. He's negotiating to take over 2 more hospitals. If he succeeds, this becomes regional, then statewide, then we all become replaceable parts in his money machine," Denise finished. "I know. I've been watching it happen for 8 years. "Why didn't you report it?" "To who? The board? They're his friends. The state? He's got politicians in his pocket. The feds? They don't care about individual hospitals." Denise's laugh was bitter. "You can't fight people like Garrison. They always win." "Not always." Denise studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled a USB drive from her pocket. "I've been documenting things. Incident reports that got buried, patient complaints that disappeared, staff complaints that resulted in terminations. Everything I could save before it got destroyed." Maya took the drive carefully, like it might explode. "Why?" "Because someone needed to remember. Someone needed to witness." Denise's eyes were hard, old, tired. "I figured someday someone would care enough to actually do something." "Maybe that's you." "It is." "Then you better move fast. Garrison knows something's wrong. He's been on edge for weeks, making calls to lawyers, shredding documents. Whatever you're planning, he's preparing for it." Maya checked her phone. 9:47 p.m. "I need to get to the trauma unit." "Why?" "Because in 13 minutes, something's going to happen that Garrison can't cover up." She didn't explain further, just moved past Denise and into the corridor. Behind her, she heard the older nurse whisper something that might have been a prayer or might have been a curse. The trauma unit was operating at half staff, another Garrison cost-cutting special. 4 nurses for 16 patients, 1 doctor covering both trauma and the ER overflow. Maya recognized the recipe for disaster because she'd seen it before. In field hospitals, where resources were scarce and lives were measured in seconds. At 9:58 p.m., the radio crackled. "Incoming. Mass casualty. Bus accident on Highway 40. ETA 2 minutes." The trauma unit erupted into controlled chaos. The lone doctor, a young resident named Park, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, started barking orders. Nurses scrambled to clear bays, to prep equipment, to call for backup that wouldn't arrive in time because the other surgeon was in his car 15 minutes away. Maya moved to the supply cart, pulling out intubation equipment. The other nurses stared at her. "You were fired," one of them said. "I was here first. We'll argue about employment status after we save lives." The ambulances arrived. 6 critical patients, 3 more right behind them. A church group returning from a retreat, their charter bus clipped by a semi, sending it rolling down an embankment. The patients ranged from teenagers to elderly, all of them bleeding, broken, dying. Park was drowning. Maya could see it in his eyes, the moment of panic when a doctor realizes there are too many patients, and not enough time, and not enough hands, and people are going to die, not because of injuries, but because of inadequacy. She stepped forward. "Bay 1 and 2, I'll take them." "You're not..." "Right now I'm all you've got, so either let me work or watch them die." Park stared at her for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he nodded. Maya moved. "Bay 1, 70-year-old woman, unconscious, flail chest, probable cardiac contusion. Maya intubated her in 45 seconds, placed a central line in 90, ordered x-rays and blood work with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in places where supplies were measured in what you can carry, and backup was measured in hours if you're lucky. Bay 2, teenage boy, awake and screaming, compound femur fracture, radial pulse absent. She reduced the fracture with precision that made even Park pause to watch, stabilized the leg, restored circulation, all while talking the boy through the pain because there wasn't time for adequate medication and she needed him conscious to monitor for shock. "Who are you?" Park breathed. "Later. We've got 4 more coming." They worked through the night, saving lives in the gaps between inadequate staffing and missing equipment. Twice Maya sent runners to supply only to have them return empty-handed. The equipment should have been there but wasn't. The medication should have been stocked but weren't. She improvised. Field medicine. Combat medicine. The kind of resourcefulness that came from treating mass casualties in places where the supply chain was a helicopter that might arrive if weather permitted. At 2 a.m., when the last patient was stable and the overflow had been distributed to other units, Park found her at the nurse's station. "You're not just a regular nurse," he said. "No." "Military?" "Army, trauma specialist, served in 3 combat zones." "Then what are you doing here?" Before Maya could answer, the elevator chimed. Both of them turned. Richard Garrison stepped out, flanked by 2 men in suits and Morrison, the security guard. Even at 2 a.m., Garrison looked perfectly composed, perfectly pressed, perfectly in control. "Dr. Park," he said pleasantly, "I received a report that we had an unauthorized individual working in the trauma unit. I'm here to address the situation." Park stepped forward. "She saved lives tonight. 6 of them. Maybe more. I'm sure she's very talented, but she doesn't work here anymore." Garrison's smile was arctic. "Miss Thornton, I believe I made it clear that returning to this hospital constitutes trespassing. The patients are the hospital's concern, not yours. You are no longer affiliated with Sterling Grace. Morrison, please escort her off the premises. If she resists, call the police." Morrison stepped forward, his hand moving to the cuffs on his belt. "Wait," Park said. "You can't just..." "Dr. Park, unless you'd like to join her in unemployment, I suggest you return to your patients." The young doctor looked between Maya and Garrison, and Maya saw the moment he broke. The moment when idealism crashed against the reality of student loans and career prospects, and the 1,000 small compromises that turned good people into silent witnesses. Park stepped back. Maya didn't blame him. The system was designed to break people exactly like this. Morrison reached for her arm, and Maya was tensing to comply. Her mission didn't require heroic resistance, just documentation and patience, when someone else stepped off the elevator. 3 someones, actually. They wore suits, dark and unremarkable. They carried credentials instead of weapons. And when they presented those credentials to Garrison, his perfect composure finally cracked. "Federal agents," the lead investigator said. "Richard Garrison, We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all financial and medical records related to government contracts dating back 8 years. Garrison's face went white. On whose authority? The United States Attorney for the Western District. We also have authorization to interview all current and former employees regarding allegations of fraud, medical malpractice, and conspiracy to defraud federal programs. This is absurd. I'll have my lawyers. Your lawyers have already been notified. We're executing the warrant now. The investigator looked past Garrison to where Maya stood, still flanked by the confused security guard. Something passed between them. Not quite acknowledgement, not quite recognition. Just the silent communication of people who'd been working the same case from different angles. Miss Thornton, the investigator said, we'll need your statement, all of it. Garrison's head snapped around, his eyes finding Maya with laser focus. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. You planned this. You were working for them from the beginning. Maya met his gaze steadily. I was working for the people who died because you treated their lives as line items on a budget. There's a difference. You have no authority here. You're just a former Army captain, the investigator interrupted. Medical Intelligence Division, recruited specifically for this operation after your hospital appeared on federal radar for irregularities in military medical supply contracts. Captain Thornton has been operating undercover for 3 months. The trauma unit had gone absolutely silent. Park stared. The nurses stared. Morrison, still holding his useless handcuffs, stared. Garrison's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is entrapment. It's illegal. It's authorized, the investigator said. We have probable cause. We have documentation. And now, thanks to Captain Thornton's work, we have witnesses. More agents emerged from the elevators, a dozen of them, fanning out through the hospital with the precision of a military operation. Maya had briefed them on the layout, on the security blind spots, on exactly where to find the evidence that Garrison thought he'd hidden so well. You can't do this, Garrison said, his voice rising. I have rights. I have connections. I have the right to remain silent, the investigator said, which I suggest you exercise. Richard Garrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and violation of federal contracting regulations. Additional charges are pending. Another agent moved forward with handcuffs. Federal ones, not the cheap security guard variety that Morrison was still clutching like a talisman. Garrison looked at Maya one last time. You'll never work in healthcare again. I'll make sure of it. I don't think you'll be in a position to make sure of anything, Maya said quietly. Except maybe the color of your prison jumpsuit. The agents led him away, still protesting, still threatening, still absolutely certain that his power and connections would save him right up until the moment the elevator doors closed and the only sound was the quiet beeping of patient monitors and the shocked breathing of everyone who remained. Park found his voice first. What just happened? Maya pulled off her temporary badge, the one that should have been deactivated 12 hours ago, and set it on the nurse's station counter. Justice, finally. The night shift continued because patients still needed care, and the work didn't stop just because the person signing the paychecks had been arrested. Maya stayed until 7 a.m., finishing the shift she'd started, documenting every patient, every intervention, every medication administered. When she finally walked out of Sterling Grace Hospital, as the sun rose over Riverside, she found Denise waiting by the staff entrance, smoking a cigarette she shouldn't have, and looking 10 years younger than she had the day before. That USB drive I gave you, Denise said. Did it help? More than you know. Good. Denise took a long drag. I've been saving that for 8 years. Figured either I'd take it to my grave or someone would finally give a damn. Glad it was the second option. Maya pulled her car keys from her pocket, ready to leave, ready to move on to the next assignment, the next hospital that needed investigation, the next group of executives who'd mistaken healthcare for profit margins. But Denise wasn't done. What happens now to the hospital? Federal oversight until the investigation concludes. New management. Full audit of every department. Charges filed against anyone who knowingly participated in the fraud. And the nurses who tried to speak up? The ones Garrison fired? Reinstated with back pay, Full record expungement, the whole thing. Denise smiled, actually smiled. Tessa's going to cry when she hears that. She should hear it from you. You're the senior nurse now, probably acting charge until they hire permanent management. Me? Denise laughed, the sound sharp and rusty like she'd forgotten how. I'm just a nurse who kept her head down for 8 years. No, Maya said. You're the nurse who documented everything even when you thought no one would care. That's not keeping your head down, that's courage. She left Denise there, smoking and thinking, and drove away from Sterling Grace Hospital for what she thought might be the last time. She thought wrong. 3 days later, Maya received a call from a number she recognized, the federal prosecutor assigned to the Sterling Grace case. We have a problem, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh said without preamble. Garrison made bail. Maya pulled over to the side of the road, her rental car idling in a coffee shop parking lot 200 miles from Riverside. She'd been reassigned already, tracking irregularities at a hospital in the northern part of the state. How? The charges. His lawyers argued he's not a flight risk. Prominent community member, ties to the area, no prior criminal record. Judge set bail at $2 million. He posted it in 4 hours. That's not the problem, though, is it? Walsh's silence confirmed it. He's back at the hospital. What? The board voted to reinstate him pending the outcome of the investigation. They're calling it innocent until proven guilty and claiming that removing him would constitute wrongful termination and expose the hospital to liability. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The board members are complicit. Half of them are on his payroll through shell companies. I know what we documented, but until we can prove direct knowledge and intent, they're protected by corporate liability shields. Right now, Garrison is back in his office, and the staff is terrified. 3 nurses quit yesterday. 2 more are on leave. Denise called my office this morning saying people are being threatened. What kind of threats? The subtle kind. Reassignments to undesirable shifts. Performance reviews suddenly discovering deficiencies. Mentions of how difficult it is to find nursing work after termination for cause. Nothing we can prosecute. Everything calculated to silence witnesses before trial. Maya checked her mirrors, already calculating drive time back to Riverside. I'm coming back. That's not advisable. You're a witness. Your presence could compromise? He's destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses. My presence is the least of your problems. Captain Thornton. I'll be there in 3 hours. Maya ended the call and pulled back onto the highway, driving south with the kind of focused intensity that had gotten her through firefights and field hospitals and situations where hesitation meant death. She made it in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Sterling Grace Hospital looked exactly the same from the outside. Gleaming glass and steel, the architecture of modern healthcare, the promise of excellence etched into marble and metal. But Maya could feel the difference the moment she walked through the main entrance. The staff moved differently, quieter, heads down, eyes averted. Fear had a smell in hospitals. It mixed with antiseptic and recycled air and became something else entirely, the scent of people who knew they were expendable. Maya didn't go to administration. She went straight to the trauma unit. The day shift was in chaos. Not the controlled chaos of emergency medicine, but the frantic disorder of understaffing and missing resources. 2 nurses covered what should have required 6. One doctor, not Park, someone Maya didn't recognize, moved between patients with the glazed efficiency of someone operating on autopilot and caffeine. Tessa saw her first. The young nurse's face lit up, then immediately clouded with worry. You shouldn't be here. Garrison told everyone you're banned from the hospital. He said if anyone talks to you, they're fired. Where's Denise? Suspended. He claimed she violated protocol by giving you access to restricted areas. She's home pending an investigation. Maya felt ice settle in her chest. Who else? Doctor. Park was reassigned to the clinic in the basement. It's basically a demotion. Morrison from security was fired for not stopping you that night. 3 of the night shift nurses quit rather than face whatever Garrison has planned. Tessa's voice dropped to a whisper. He's making examples. He wants everyone to know what happens when you cross him. He's a federal defendant. He can't just... He's the CEO, and the board backs him. And everyone's too scared to fight back because we all need these jobs, and he controls the references and the licensing board complaints and everything. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. I thought when they arrested him it would change things. But it's worse now. So much worse. Maya squeezed her shoulder once, briefly. It's going to be okay. How? He's untouchable. Even in handcuffs, he's still running this place. He's not untouchable. He's just used to people believing he is. There's a difference. Before Tessa could respond, a code blue alarm screamed through the unit. Bay 7. The nurses and doctor converged, moving with practiced urgency despite the exhaustion. Maya followed, her instincts overriding protocol and employment status and common sense. The patient was a middle-aged man in acute respiratory distress, his oxygen saturation plummeting despite supplemental oxygen. The doctor, his badge read Dr. Hernandez, started barking orders, but Maya could see the problem immediately. The oxygen equipment wasn't working properly. The flow rate showed 12 liters, but the actual delivery was maybe half that. The concentrator's failing, Maya said. You need to switch to tank oxygen. Hernandez looked at her, recognition flashing across his face. You're the one, Garrison. Tank oxygen, now, or he codes in 90 seconds. The doctor hesitated for one precious heartbeat, caught between following orders from administration and saving a life. Maya didn't wait. She grabbed a portable oxygen tank from the equipment bay, checked the regulator, and swapped out the connections while Hernandez intubated. The patient's oxygen levels stabilized. Color returned to his face. The monitor's alarm silenced. Hernandez stared at her. That equipment passed inspection last week. No, it didn't. It passed paperwork. There's a difference. Maya checked the concentrator's maintenance log, noting the dates. This unit should have been serviced 3 months ago. Instead, someone signed off on inspections that never happened. How do you know? Because I've seen this pattern before. Cut maintenance costs, forge the paperwork, hope nothing breaks during business hours. She showed him the log. Look at the signatures, same handwriting, same pen, all signed on the same day even though they're supposed to be weekly checks. Hernandez took the clipboard with shaking hands. If you're right, there could be other equipment. There is, I guarantee it. Oh, we need to report this. To who? Garrison? The doctor's face went pale. What do I do? Document everything, photograph the equipment, save the logs, and when federal investigators come back, and they will come back, you tell them exactly what you found. They'll fire me. They'll try, but you'll have evidence and witnesses and the truth. Maya met his eyes. That's more than most people have when they fight back. She left him there, knowing he'd have to make his own choice about courage versus security. She'd learned long ago that you couldn't force people to be brave. You could only show them it was possible and hope they found their own reasons. Maya made her way to the administrative floor, bypassing the main elevators for the service stairs that security rarely monitored. The executive corridor was quiet, insulated from the chaos below by expensive carpet and soundproofing. Garrison's door was closed, but light showed underneath. She didn't knock. Garrison looked up from his desk, his expression cycling from surprise to fury to something calculating and cold. Get out, now, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Call them. Maya closed the door behind her. I'd love to explain to the police why a federal defendant is back at the hospital intimidating witnesses. I'm not intimidating anyone. I'm running my hospital. It's not your hospital. Not anymore. The federal government has oversight. The board is under investigation. You're out on bail because you convinced a judge you're not dangerous. But we both know that's a lie. Garrison stood, moving around his desk with the predatory grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime cornering people in rooms like this. You think you're clever. You think you can destroy everything I've built with your little undercover operation. But you forgot something important. What's that? I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who make federal prosecutors look like public defenders. Connections that go all the way to the state capitol and beyond. Friends who owe me favors. Enemies who fear me. He smiled. You might have won the battle, Captain Thornton, but you won't win the war. This isn't a war. It's a reckoning. Philosophical. How noble. Garrison leaned against his desk, relaxed now, confident. Let me tell you how this actually ends. The investigation drags on for years. My lawyers file motion after motion, appeal after appeal. Meanwhile, I'm still here, still running this hospital, still making the decisions that matter. And one by one, your witnesses disappear. Not literally, of course. That would be crude. But they find new jobs, or they get tired of the pressure. Or they realize their careers are more important than their principles. You're describing yourself. I'm describing human nature. People are predictable, Captain. They want security. They want comfort. They want to believe they're good without actually having to sacrifice anything for it. You're the anomaly, someone who actually means what she says. But you're one person, and I have an entire system designed to grind people like you into dust. Maya walked to his wall of photographs, studying the images of Garrison with politicians, with donors, with medical board members. You're right about one thing. The system is designed to protect people like you. But systems have weaknesses. And you just showed me yours. What weakness? Arrogance. You actually think you're going to walk away from this. Garrison's smile hardened. I know I am, because I always do. That's the difference between people like you and people like me. You believe in justice. I believe in leverage, and right now I have more leverage than you can possibly comprehend. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air between them. Garrison studied her, trying to read the angle, the trap, the hidden strategy. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, tossing it onto the desk. Recognize these names? Maya opened the folder. Inside were files on every nurse who'd cooperated with the federal investigation. Not just names, home addresses, financial records, family information, children's schools, spouse employment, medical histories, everything private laid bare. Where did you get this? I have friends in interesting places, and before you think about crying to your federal handlers, remember, I haven't done anything illegal. This is all public record, carefully compiled by very expensive researchers. I'm simply being thorough about understanding my employees. You're building targets. I'm protecting my interests. There's a difference. Garrison closed the folder. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to tell your prosecutor friends that witness intimidation is very difficult to prove when everything is documented through proper channels. And you're going to watch as, one by one, your case falls apart. You're wrong. Am I? Let's test that theory. He pressed a button on his phone. Brenda, send in our guest. The door opened and a man entered, late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of calm competence that came from decades of making problems disappear. He carried a briefcase and wore a smile that never reached his eyes. Captain Thornton, meet Marcus Webb. He's very interested in meeting you. Maya's blood went cold. Marcus Webb, the patient she'd saved 3 nights ago. The construction supervisor with the splenic laceration who should have been recovering in post-op, not standing in Garrison's office in a suit that cost more than most people made in a month. There was no motorcycle accident, she said slowly. Webb's smile widened. There was, just not mine. I borrowed the identity of an actual accident victim with his permission and a generous payment to his family. We needed someone on the inside to observe, to document, to verify what Garrison suspected, that federal investigators had planted someone in the hospital. You let yourself be injured. You let them cut you open. A small price for due diligence. Garrison pays very well for loyalty, and the splenic laceration was minor enough that the risks were acceptable. Webb opened his briefcase, pulling out a tablet. I recorded everything, every conversation you had, every corner you cut, every protocol you violated, all admissible in court to demonstrate that your investigation was compromised by overzealous tactics. Maya's mind raced through the implications. Every word she'd said to Denise, every instruction she'd given to Park, every moment she'd operated outside the strict boundaries of her cover. It won't work, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. You faked a medical emergency to entrap a federal investigator. That's obstruction of justice. Is it? Or is it a concerned citizen documenting what he believed to be malpractice by an unqualified individual claiming to be a nurse? Webb tilted his head. The courts will decide, but in the meantime, your credibility is destroyed. And without your testimony, the case against Garrison becomes significantly weaker. Garrison leaned back in his chair, satisfaction radiating from every line of his body. I told you I have resources. Did you really think I'd just sit back and let you destroy me? I've been 3 steps ahead since the moment you walked into this hospital. Maya looked between them, calculating odds, assessing options. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the air thinner. This was the moment Garrison had been building toward. The revelation that would break lesser investigators, would make them doubt themselves, would send them running to their handlers to report that the case was compromised. But Maya had been broken before, in places where the stakes were life and death, where failure meant body bags and flag-draped coffins. This was just another kind of combat. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. "What mistake?" Garrison asked. "You assumed I was working alone." The satisfaction on his face flickered. "What?" "You assumed the federal investigation depended on my testimony, that if you discredited me, the case falls apart." Maya pulled out her phone, opening an app that showed a live audio feed. "But I've been wearing a wire since the moment I walked into this building. Everything you just said, the files on witnesses, the planted patient, the obstruction of justice, all recorded, all admissible, all enough to add witness tampering and obstruction to your charges." Garrison's face went white. Webb moved for the door, but it opened before he reached it, and federal agents poured in, led by the same investigator who'd arrested Garrison 3 days ago. "Richard Garrison," the agent said, "you're under arrest for witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation. Marcus Webb, you're also under arrest for the same charges, plus fraud and filing false police reports." Garrison found his voice. "This is entrapment. She provoked. She walked into your office and you voluntarily confessed to multiple federal crimes. That's not entrapment. That's stupidity." The agent gestured to his team. "Take them." As handcuffs clicked around Garrison's wrists for the second time in less than a week, Maya saw the moment his certainty crumbled. The moment he realized that his resources, his connections, his carefully constructed system of leverage and control had failed him. "You can't do this," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "I already did." Maya stepped aside as the agents led both men toward the door. "And this time, there's no bail, no second chances, just consequences." She followed them out into the corridor where staff had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They watched in silence as Garrison was escorted past them, past the elevator, toward the service stairs where no cameras would capture the indignity of his second arrest. Tessa was crying. Dr. Hernandez looked stunned. Other staff members whispered among themselves, trying to process what they'd witnessed. Maya addressed them all, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Garrison kept files on some of you, personal information meant to intimidate and control. Those files are now federal evidence. They can't be used against you. The investigation into this hospital is ongoing, but the person responsible for the culture of fear is gone. For good this time." "What happens now?" someone asked from the back of the crowd. "Now you do your jobs. You take care of patients. You speak up when you see something wrong. You remember that healthcare is about people, not profit margins." Maya started walking toward the elevator. "And you stop being afraid of men like Garrison, because the only power they have is the power we give them." She rode the elevator down alone, letting the weight of the past week settle into her bones. The case wasn't over. There would be depositions, testimonies, trials that could stretch for months or years. But the spine of it was broken. Garrison's arrest on tape, his confession on record, his co-conspirator caught red-handed in federal obstruction. Maya walked out of Sterling Grace Hospital into afternoon sunlight, pulling off the wire that had been concealed under her shirt. She'd known Garrison would try something. Men like him always did. They couldn't help themselves, couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat, to explain exactly how clever they'd been. That arrogance was always their downfall. Her phone buzzed with a text from Walsh. "Beautiful work. We have him cold." Maya typed back. "What about the board? Working on it?" "Working. Your recordings give us probable cause for deeper investigation. We'll trace the money. And the hospital? Federal oversight continues until we're satisfied they can operate without criminal management. Could be months. Could be years." Maya sat in her car, watching staff enter and exit the building. Some looked shell-shocked. Others looked relieved. A few looked angry, as if her investigation had disrupted something they'd learned to live with, however toxic. Change was like that. Even necessary change. Even deserved change. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Captain Thornton? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm the interim director of the Hospital Oversight Committee appointed by the federal court. I'd like to speak with you about a position. I'm not looking for permanent employment. I'm not offering it. I need someone to help rebuild this hospital's culture, someone the staff trusts, someone who understands both medicine and accountability. A consultant position, 6 months, with the explicit goal of creating systems that prevent another Garrison from taking root. Maya watched a young nurse exit the building, scrolling through her phone with the exhausted relief of someone whose shift had finally ended. I'm an investigator, not an administrator. You're someone who made people believe change was possible. That's rarer than you think, Chen paused. The staff is traumatized. They've been operating under constant threat for years. They need to see that speaking up doesn't end careers. It saves them. You're the proof of that. I work better in the shadows. Then work in the shadows here. Help me identify the middle managers who enabled Garrison. Help me restructure departments so accountability flows both ways. Help me build something that can survive after the federal oversight ends. Chen's voice softened. Please. These people deserve better than what they've had. And you're the one who proved it was possible to fight back and win. Maya closed her eyes, thinking of Denise documenting abuses for 8 years with no expectation of rescue. Of Tessa crying because she'd thought justice was impossible. Of Park making the choice to step back because the system was designed to break people exactly like him. 6 months, she said, and I want full access to all records, all departments, all personnel files. Done. And immunity for any staff member who cooperates with continuing investigations. I'll work with the prosecutors. And Denise gets her job back. With a promotion. She's earned it. Chen laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Anything else? Yes. No more retaliation. No more silent punishments. Anyone who tries that answers to me personally. Agreed. When can you start? Maya looked at the hospital, at the building that had been both battlefield and victory, monument and cautionary tale. Tomorrow. She ended the call and sat in the parking lot until the sun set and the night shift arrived. Among them, she saw Denise, not suspended after all, or perhaps reinstated already, the bureaucracy moving with unexpected speed when federal prosecutors made suggestions. The older nurse spotted Maya's car and walked over, knocking on the window. Maya rolled it down. Thought you were suspended. Was. Then I got a call an hour ago saying administrative leave was rescinded with full pay. They wouldn't say why, but I'm guessing it has something to do with Garrison getting arrested. Again. Denise studied her. You're not leaving. Not yet. Good. Because someone needs to make sure they don't just replace Garrison with another version of him. Someone needs to be watching. That's what I thought. Denise smiled, tired and real. See you inside? Tomorrow. I start officially tomorrow. Then unofficially tonight, let me buy you coffee in the cafeteria. Worst coffee in the city, but it's honest about being terrible. That's more than I can say for most things in this hospital. Maya followed her inside, past security that didn't stop her this time, past the lobby with its promises etched in stone, into the depths of the building where the real work happened. The cafeteria was nearly empty, just a handful of staff grabbing food between crises. They sat with terrible coffee and styrofoam cups, and Denise told her stories. 8 years of stories. Small rebellions that no one noticed. Documentation that no one read. Complaints filed through proper channels that disappeared into administrative black holes. I stopped believing it would matter, Denise admitted. I kept doing it because I needed to remember that I tried. That I didn't just accept it. She wrapped her hands around the cup. Then you showed up and actually did something, actually made them pay. We made them pay. Your files were crucial. My files were insurance in case I lost my mind and started thinking I'd imagined it all. You were the one who had the courage to actually use them. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 women who'd chosen different forms of resistance in the same broken system. Outside the cafeteria windows, the city lights spread across the valley, each one representing lives that depended on hospitals operating with integrity instead of greed. Maya's phone buzzed. A news alert. Sterling Grace CEO arrested on federal charges. Again. Hospital board under investigation. The story was breaking. By morning, every news outlet in the state would be covering it. By next week, it would be national news. Another hospital scandal, another corrupt executive, another example of the system failing the people it was meant to serve. But also another example of someone fighting back and winning. Denise read the alert over her shoulder. Think it'll change anything? Nationally, I mean. Think other hospitals will learn from this? Some will, some won't. But the nurses and doctors who've been documenting abuses in silence, who've been keeping records like you did, they'll see this and know it's possible. That's something. Is it enough? Maya thought of every hospital she'd investigated, every corrupt administrator who'd believed they were untouchable, every healthcare worker who'd been silenced and threatened and broken by systems designed to prioritize profit over people. It's a start, she said finally. And sometimes a start is all you need to build something better. Her phone rang again. Walsh. Maya answered. We have a problem, the prosecutor said, and Maya's chest tightened because those words never meant anything good. Garrison's lawyers filed an emergency motion. They're claiming the second arrest was illegal because the wire you wore wasn't properly authorized. What? They're saying the warrant for electronic surveillance only covered hospital property accessed during normal investigation protocols. Since you entered Garrison's office outside your official capacity, they claim any recordings are inadmissible. Maya set down her coffee carefully, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. That's absurd. I was acting on behalf of ongoing federal investigation. I know, and the judge will probably deny the motion, but it buys Garrison time, and his lawyers are good. They'll find every technical loophole, every procedural gap, every opportunity to delay and obfuscate. Walsh sighed. We'll fight it. We'll win eventually, but this is going to take longer than I hoped. How much longer? Months minimum, maybe a year before trial, and that's if everything goes perfectly. Maya thanked her and ended the call, staring at the phone like it might offer different answers if she looked hard enough. Denise watched her. Bad news? Garrison's fighting back. His lawyers found a technicality. Of course they did. Men like him always find a way to delay justice. The older nurse stood collecting their cups. But delay isn't the same as escape, and you'll be here, making sure this hospital runs the right way while we wait for the courts to catch up. What if the courts don't catch up? What if he finds a way out? Then we document everything again. We build the case again. We fight again. Denise met her eyes. That's what we do. That's all we can do. Maya drove back to her apartment as midnight approached, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. This was the fatigue of knowing that victory wasn't clean, wasn't final, wasn't the ending she'd hoped for. Garrison was in custody, but fighting. The hospital was under oversight, but struggling. The staff was freed from immediate threat, but still traumatized by years of abuse. Nothing was resolved. Everything was complicated. Her phone buzzed with one final message. This one from a number she didn't recognize, but a name she did. Dr. Park. Thank you for showing us it was possible to fight back. Some of us are organizing, nurses, doctors, support staff. We're going to make sure this never happens again. Not here, not anywhere we work. Just wanted you to know. Maya read it twice, then saved it in a folder marked Evidence of Hope. She fell asleep on her couch, still wearing her clothes, still wearing the weight of everything that had happened and everything still to come. And when she dreamed of hospitals run by people who cared more about patients than profit, of healthcare workers who spoke up without fear, of executives who faced consequences instead of escape routes. She dreamed of a system that worked the way it was supposed to. And when she woke at dawn to her phone ringing with yet another crisis, yet another complication, yet another battle in a war that never truly ended, she answered it anyway. Because that's what you did when you believed justice was possible. You fought for it, again and again and again, until it finally arrived. The voice on the other end was Rebecca Chen. We have a situation. The board is meeting this morning to vote on dissolving federal oversight. They claim Garrison was an isolated incident and the hospital can self-regulate. I need you here, now. Maya was already moving before Chen finished the sentence, grabbing her jacket and keys while cradling the phone against her shoulder. When does the vote happen? 9 a.m., 2 hours from now. Chen's voice was tight with controlled urgency. They're claiming that with Garrison arrested, the crisis is resolved. They want to show investors and insurance companies that Sterling Grace is stable again. Stable means they can go back to cutting corners without oversight. Exactly. And 3 board members who weren't implicated in the initial investigation are leading the charge. They're positioning themselves as the clean slate, reformers who will restore the hospital's reputation. Maya was in her car now, engine already running. Names: Douglas Hendricks, Chief Financial Officer, Patricia Yates, Head of Community Relations, and James Whitmore, who chairs the board's Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee. Maya couldn't keep the bitter irony from her voice. How convenient. They've prepared a presentation showing that patient outcomes have remained stable, that staffing is adequate, that financial controls are in place. They're going to argue that federal oversight is expensive, invasive, and unnecessary. Patient outcomes are stable because the staff is working double shifts to compensate for understaffing. Financial controls exist on paper, but not in practice. And the only reason staffing appears adequate is because you haven't seen the resignation letters piling up from nurses who can't take it anymore. I know all that, but they have charts and graphs and carefully selected data points. Unless you can counter with something equally compelling, the judge might agree to lift oversight. Maya ran a red light, barely slowing, her mind already assembling strategy. I need access to the real numbers, not the sanitized reports Garrison prepared for external review. The actual patient incident reports, medication error logs, equipment failure documentation. Everything the staff has been filing that administration buried. I can get you access, but you'll need time to analyze it properly. We have 2 hours. Then I'll work fast. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty when Maya arrived at 7:15, the quiet before the day shift change. She bypassed the main entrance, heading straight for the records department in the basement, a windowless warren of filing cabinets and outdated computer systems where administrative assistants with decades of institutional knowledge kept the hospital's actual memory. The woman behind the desk looked up as Maya entered, her name tag reading Gloria Martinez, Records Supervisor, 32 years service. She studied Maya with the kind of assessment that came from 3 decades of watching hospital politics destroy good people. "You're the one who got Garrison arrested," Gloria said. Not a question. Twice. "Good. That bastard cut my department's budget every year while buying himself new office furniture." She gestured at the cramped space, the ancient computers, the filing cabinets literally held together with tape. "What do you need?" "Everything they don't want me to see." Gloria's smile was sharp as surgery. "That's a lot of files." "I have 2 hours." "Then we better hurry." What followed was a masterclass in institutional archaeology. Gloria knew exactly where every buried report lived, every suppressed incident documentation, every complaint that had been marked resolved without actual resolution. She pulled files with the efficiency of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Patient falls that were blamed on individual nurse negligence rather than inadequate staffing ratios. Medication errors caused by pharmacy understaffing and missing safety protocols. Equipment failures that were classified as isolated incidents instead of systematic maintenance neglect. Surgical complications that occurred during cases where cost-cutting measures meant missing specialized instruments. Each file told the same story: corners cut, risks accepted, blame shifted downward to the staff who had no power to fix systemic problems. Maya photographed everything, her phone's camera clicking constantly as Gloria pulled folder after folder. The data was damning, but it was also scattered, individual incidents that looked like random bad luck unless you understood the pattern. "I need the timeline," Maya said. "When did each of these incidents occur relative to budget cuts?" Gloria pulled out a different file. Her personal records, kept separately from official hospital documentation. "I've been tracking it for 5 years. Every time Garrison cut a department budget, I marked it. Every time an incident occurred that could be traced to understaffing or missing equipment, I noted the date." The correlation was devastating. Budget cuts in nursing, spike in patient falls and medication errors within 30 days. Maintenance budget reduced. Equipment failures tripled within 2 months. Pharmacy staff eliminated. Wrong medication dispensed increased by 40%. "Why didn't you report this?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. "To who? The board that approved the budgets?" The state inspectors who scheduled their visits months in advance so everything could be staged? The newspapers that published Garrison's press releases about fiscal responsibility? Gloria's hand shook slightly as she handed over the file. I documented it because someone needed to remember, because someday I hoped someone would care. Maya gripped the file like a lifeline. This is everything I need. This proves systematic negligence. It proves what we already knew, whether it changes anything. Gloria shrugged. You've seen how these things go. Rich men hire expensive lawyers. Data gets questioned. Experts disagree. And the people with power decide that accountability is too expensive. Not this time. That's what they all say. But Gloria smiled anyway, hope and cynicism warring on her face. Go prove me wrong. Maya made it to the conference room at 8:45, arms loaded with files and her laptop displaying graphs she'd compiled at breakneck speed. The board members were already assembled, 7 of them remaining after Garrison, and 2 others had been removed pending investigation. Hendricks sat at the head of the table, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the kind of self-assured posture that came from a lifetime of being the smartest person in the room. Yates flanked him, perfectly coiffed and wearing a smile that never wavered. Whitmore looked like someone's grandfather, all gentle eyes and patient expressions. They looked reasonable, trustworthy. Exactly the kind of people who could convince a judge that federal oversight was overreach. Rebecca Chen sat at the opposite end of the table, flanked by 2 federal attorneys who'd arrived from the district office. Their presence was meant to intimidate, to remind the board that this wasn't just a hospital matter, it was a criminal investigation. But Hendricks didn't look intimidated. He looked confident. Shall we begin? He opened a leather portfolio, pulling out a presentation folder. Thank you all for coming. I know we've all been through a difficult period, but I believe it's time to look forward. Sterling Grace has served this community for 47 years, and we've weathered crises before. This isn't a crisis, one of the federal attorneys said. It's a federal fraud investigation. Regarding one individual who has been removed and arrested, the investigation of Richard Garrison is important, and we support it fully. But the hospital itself, the institution, has been fundamentally sound. Your patient outcomes demonstrate that your staff is compensating for systematic failures through heroic effort and unsustainable overtime, Maya interrupted, setting her files on the table. Which works until those staff members burn out, quit, or make mistakes caused by exhaustion. Hendricks regarded her with polite condescension. And you are? Maya Thornton, consultant to the Federal Oversight Committee. Ah, yes. The undercover investigator. His smile was thin. Forgive me if I question the objectivity of someone who entered this hospital under false pretenses. Forgive me if I question the ethics of a CFO who approved budgets that killed patients. The room went silent. Yates's smile finally flickered. Whitmore's gentle expression hardened. That's a serious accusation, Hendricks said carefully. Do you have evidence? Maya opened the first file. March 2023. You cut nursing staff on the cardiac unit by 20%. Within 6 weeks, 3 patients fell during transfer because there weren't enough nurses to provide adequate supervision. 2 sustained injuries requiring extended hospitalization. 1 died from complications. Correlation isn't causation. Patients fall in hospitals. April 2023. You eliminated night shift pharmacy coverage to save $70,000 annually. Within 2 months, medication errors increased by 43% because nurses had to retrieve medications themselves from automated dispensers without pharmacist verification. We implemented safeguards. That failed because safeguards require staff time you didn't allocate. Maya pulled another file. June 2023. You deferred maintenance on surgical equipment to save money. A laparoscopic instrument failed during a gallbladder removal, perforating the patient's intestine. She required emergency surgery and spent 3 weeks in ICU. Well, that was investigated and determined to be a random equipment failure, except the equipment was 8 months overdue for mandated maintenance, which your budget eliminated. Maya spread documents across the table. I have 47 incidents over 3 years. Everyone traceable to budget decisions you approved. Everyone resulting in patient harm. Everyone classified as isolated incidents to avoid pattern recognition. Hendrick's composure was cracking. We made difficult decisions in a challenging financial environment. Healthcare costs are rising, insurance reimbursements are falling, and executive compensation kept increasing. Garrison's salary went up 12% in the same year you cut nursing staff. Your bonus structure rewarded cost reduction without measuring patient outcomes. Maya pulled out Gloria's timeline. This shows every budget cut mapped against patient incidents. The correlation is undeniable. One of the federal attorneys leaned forward, studying the documents. This wasn't included in the initial investigation materials because it was deliberately buried. Incident reports were filed, then classified in ways that prevented pattern analysis. Falls were blamed on patient noncompliance, medication errors attributed to individual nurse mistakes, equipment failures called unpredictable mechanical issues. Maya met Hendricks's eyes. You built a system designed to hide systematic negligence behind isolated incidents. We built a sustainable healthcare model, Yates interjected, her voice smooth and practiced. The reality is that modern hospitals must balance quality care with fiscal responsibility. Unlimited resources don't exist. We made choices, difficult choices, that kept Sterling Grace operational when other hospitals in this region have closed. You made choices that prioritize profit over patients. We made choices that ensured this hospital could continue serving the community instead of declaring bankruptcy. Yates opened her own folder. I have data too, Captain Thornton. Patient satisfaction scores remained above 80%. Mortality rates stayed within acceptable ranges. Regulatory compliance was maintained. By every objective measure, Sterling Grace continued to provide quality care. Acceptable ranges, quality care. Maya's voice was quiet, dangerous. Tell that to Margaret Chen, whose mother fell and broke her hip because there weren't enough nurses on the night shift. Tell that to David Park, no relation to our Dr. Park, whose father received the wrong medication and suffered irreversible kidney damage. Tell that to Sarah Wilson, who lost her wife to surgical complications that occurred because equipment that should have been maintained wasn't. Tragic incidents occur in every hospital, at higher rates in hospitals that cut corners. Maya pulled up a graph on her laptop. I compared Sterling Grace's incident rates to other hospitals of similar size in this region. Your fall rate is 32% higher. Your medication error rate is 47% higher. Your surgical complication rate is 29% higher. The only thing that's lower is your staffing budget. Whitmore spoke for the first time, his grandfatherly voice carefully modulated. I understand your concerns, Captain Thornton, but the board's fiduciary responsibility requires us to ensure the hospital's long-term viability. If we had maintained the staffing levels and budgets you're suggesting, Sterling Grace would have been forced to close 3 years ago. Then where would this community's health care be? Better served by a hospital that actually cares about patient safety. Easy to say when you're not responsible for keeping the doors open. Maya turned to the federal attorneys. This isn't just negligence. It's systematic fraud. They billed insurance companies and Medicare for services they didn't adequately provide. They claimed compliance with staffing standards they violated. They certified equipment maintenance they didn't perform. Every budget cut that resulted in substandard care while billing for standard care is fraud. The senior federal attorney, a woman named Davidson who'd been silent until now, flipped through the files Maya had provided. These are serious allegations. If we can prove systematic billing fraud in addition to Garrison's embezzlement, you can prove it? Gloria Martinez appeared in the doorway, carrying an additional box of files. I have 7 years of billing records cross-referenced with actual service delivery. Every time they billed for 1-to-4 nurse-patient ratios while actually operating at 1-to-8. Every time they charged for equipment maintenance they didn't perform. Every time they claimed compliance with standards they violated. Hendricks stood abruptly. This is harassment. You're trying to criminalize normal business operations. Normal business operations don't systematically endanger patients for profit, Davidson said. We'll need to review all of this evidence thoroughly. The motion to lift federal oversight is denied pending further investigation. You can't do that. We have rights. You have the right to operate in compliance with federal law. When you fail to do that, you get oversight. Davidson began collecting the files. And gentlemen, lady, I suggest you retain counsel, Because what I'm seeing here extends far beyond Richard Garrison. The board members exchanged glances, and Maya saw the moment their confidence shattered. They'd expected to walk into this meeting and resume control. Instead, they were walking out as potential defendants. Yates recovered first, her smile back in place like armor. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. When you review the complete context is that people died while you approved budgets that made their deaths more likely. Maya stood. And now you get to explain that to federal prosecutors. She walked out of the conference room with Chen beside her, leaving the board members to their suddenly very urgent phone calls to very expensive lawyers. That was incredible, Chen said quietly. I've never seen board members lose composure like that. They're scared. They should be. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Walsh. What did you do? Hendrick's attorney just called demanding to know what new charges we're filing. Maya typed back, showed them what systematic fraud looks like. They're all complicit. Can you prove it? Gloria Martinez can. She's been documenting everything for 7 years. Get her statement on record. Today. Maya found Gloria still in the conference room, organizing the files she'd brought with methodical precision. The record supervisor looked smaller somehow, older, as if delivering years of documentation had physically lightened her. They're going to want an official statement, Maya said. Federal prosecutors, probably today. Good. I've been practicing what to say for 7 years. Gloria closed the box carefully. You know they'll try to discredit me. They'll say I was a disgruntled employee, that I had an axe to grind, that my records are unreliable. Let them try. Your documentation is meticulous, and you're not the only witness anymore. No, but I'll be the one they focus on, because I kept records when I should have been keeping my head down. Gloria met her eyes. I'm too old to be scared of losing my job anymore, but I need you to promise me something. What? When this is over, when they're all in prison or bankrupt or whatever happens to rich people who get caught, make sure something actually changes. Make sure the next CFO can't do the same thing. Make sure there's oversight that actually works, not just paperwork that pretends to work. I promise. Gloria nodded once, satisfied. Then let's go give some prosecutors exactly what they need. The federal building was a fortress of glass and concrete downtown, designed to intimidate through sheer architectural authority. Maya had been there before, but Gloria walked through the security screening with the nervous energy of someone entering enemy territory. Walsh met them in a conference room on the 8th floor, flanked by 2 assistant prosecutors and a court reporter. Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. We'd like to take your sworn statement regarding financial irregularities at Sterling Grace Hospital. What followed was 3 hours of detailed testimony. Gloria walked them through every budget cut, every incident, every piece of buried documentation. She produced spreadsheets showing billing fraud, schedules proving understaffing, maintenance logs revealing falsified inspections. The prosecutors took notes with increasing urgency. The court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype machine. And Maya watched as 7 years of silent documentation became the foundation of a federal case that would bring down not just Garrison, but everyone who'd enabled him. When it was finally over, Walsh walked them to the elevator. This is extraordinary work, Ms. Martinez. Your records are exactly what we needed to expand the investigation. How many of them will actually face consequences? Gloria asked bluntly. The board members, the executives, the people who signed off on all of this. I can't promise anything, but with your testimony and Captain Thornton's investigation, we have enough to pursue criminal charges against multiple individuals. Whether those charges result in convictions? Walsh shrugged. That depends on judges and juries and factors outside our control, but we're going to try. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Gloria was quiet. Maya didn't push, just stood beside her while floors ticked past. Finally, Gloria spoke. I always wondered if it would feel different, fighting back, making them answer for what they did, but it just feels tired. Justice is exhausting. Is it justice, or is it just revenge with paperwork? Maya considered the question seriously. I think it's the difference between accepting that some people are above consequences and proving they're not. Whether that's justice or just accountability, I don't know. But it's better than silence. They emerged into afternoon sunlight, the city continuing around them with oblivious momentum. Gloria pulled out her phone, staring at the screen without really seeing it. "My daughter wants me to retire," she said. "Says I've given enough years to that hospital that I should enjoy what's left of my life instead of fighting battles that can't be won." "What do you want?" "I want to finish this. I want to see them in handcuffs. I want to watch the board try to explain to a jury why profit mattered more than people." Gloria's hands tightened around her phone. "And then maybe I'll retire, or maybe I'll find another hospital that needs someone to remember when the board tries to forget." Maya's phone rang. "Unknown number," she answered. "Captain Thornton?" A male voice, professional and careful. "This is Detective Michael Santos with Riverside PD. We need to speak with you immediately regarding an incident at Sterling Grace Hospital." Ice flooded Maya's veins. "What incident?" "There's been a death. Suspicious circumstances. We understand you've been investigating the hospital's operations. We need your insight." Maya was already moving toward her car, Gloria following. "Who died?" "Dr. James Whitmore, board member. Found in his office 2 hours ago. Apparent suicide, but the scene is inconsistent. I'm 15 minutes away." She made it in 10, pulling into the hospital parking lot to find it cordoned off with police tape. Squad cars blocked the main entrance, their lights painting the building in alternating red and blue. Uniformed officers kept staff and visitors at a distance while detectives processed the scene. Santos met her at the perimeter, a compact man in his 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of stillness that came from seeing violence in all its variations. "Thanks for coming so fast." "What happened?" Whitmore's assistant found him at 1 p.m. Single gunshot to the head, his own service weapon. Left a note taking responsibility for the hospital's financial crimes and naming Richard Garrison as the primary architect of the fraud. Maya's investigator instinct sparked. "You said the scene is inconsistent." The gun was in his right hand. Whitmore was left-handed. We confirmed with his family. The note was typed, not handwritten, and his computer shows he sent 3 emails this morning requesting emergency meetings with board members, which doesn't track with someone planning suicide. "You think he was murdered?" "I think the scene was staged to look like suicide, whether by Whitmore himself under duress or by someone else." Santos gestured toward the building. "That's what we need to determine." They walked through the cordoned area, past evidence markers and crime scene photographers. Whitmore's office was on the executive floor, 2 doors down from where Garrison's office sat empty and sealed with federal evidence tape. The body had been removed, but the blood remained, spattered across the desk, the chair, the wall behind where Whitmore had been sitting. The gun lay in an evidence bag, a Glock 9mm registered to Whitmore for home protection. Maya studied the scene with clinical detachment, noting angles and positions. The blood spatter is wrong for a self-inflicted wound. The angle suggests the gun was fired from several feet away, not contact distance. Santos nodded. "Our forensics team flagged the same thing. Plus there are defensive wounds on Whitmore's left hand, cuts and bruising suggesting he tried to grab the gun or defend himself. So someone killed him and staged it as suicide. Why?" "That's where you come in. You've been investigating the hospital's finances, documenting fraud. Who had the most to lose from Whitmore cooperating with federal prosecutors?" Maya's mind raced through possibilities. "Hendricks and Yates were at the board meeting this morning when we presented evidence of systematic fraud. They saw their legal exposure expand from accomplice to primary defendant. If Whitmore was planning to cooperate, to testify against them in exchange for immunity, they'd have motive to silence him. Where were they when this happened?" "That's the problem. Both have alibis. Hendricks was in a video conference with investors, multiple witnesses. Yates was at a community relations event, photographed continuously from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then they hired someone. Maybe. Or maybe we're looking at this wrong." Santos pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph of the suicide note. "Read this carefully." The note was brief, clinical. "I take full responsibility for the financial irregularities at Sterling Grace Hospital. Richard Garrison was the primary architect of the fraud, but I facilitated it through budget approvals and suppression of oversight. I can't live with the knowledge of how many patients were harmed by our decisions. To the families affected, I'm sorry." Maya read it twice. This doesn't sound like Whitmore. He spoke in the board meeting this morning. He was defensive but not remorseful. He believed he'd made justified business decisions. This reads like someone trying to craft a confession that covers the right legal points. Exactly what our behavioral analyst said, plus the timing is suspicious. Whitmore dies hours after evidence is presented that could send multiple board members to prison. That's not coincidence. Have you searched his computer? Phone records? Working on it. But here's the interesting part. His office was cleaned recently. We found traces of cleaning solution on surfaces that shouldn't have been cleaned, like someone wiped down everything that might have DNA or fingerprints. Maya's phone buzzed. Text from Chen. Emergency. Hendricks just announced his resignation effective immediately. Yates followed 30 minutes later. Both citing health reasons. She showed Santos the message. They're running, or covering their tracks. The detective's expression hardened. I need everything you have on the board members. Financial records, communication logs, anything that shows who had the most to gain from Whitmore's death. I'll get it to you within the hour. Maya left Santos coordinating his investigation and found Chen in the administrative wing, surrounded by chaos. Staff members rushed past with boxes of files. Attorneys conferred in urgent whispers. The entire executive infrastructure of Sterling Grace Hospital was collapsing in real time. What's happening? Maya asked. Controlled demolition. Hendricks and Yates resigned. 3 other board members followed. The remaining board is calling for emergency elections. Federal prosecutors are freezing assets pending investigation, and someone leaked the story to the press. Every news outlet in the state is running with hospital board collapses amid murder investigation. Whitmore's death isn't confirmed as murder. Doesn't matter. The narrative is already set. Sterling Grace Hospital is imploding, and everyone is scrambling to avoid being crushed in the collapse. Maya's phone rang. Walsh. Tell me you have Whitmore's testimony recorded. We don't. He wasn't scheduled to give a statement until tomorrow. Damn. Because his suicide note confesses to crimes that would have required his testimony to prove. Now we have a confession, but no cross-examination, no detailed evidence, just a convenient dead witness who takes partial blame while being unable to provide details. You think someone killed him to control the narrative? I think someone very smart recognized that Whitmore was the weak link. He was the ethics committee chair, which means he had the most cognitive dissonance about approving unethical budgets. Under pressure, he might have broken, might have testified comprehensively about board decisions and motivations. Walsh paused. But dead, he's just a tragic figure who took responsibility without implicating others more than necessary. The note mentioned Garrison specifically, which protects everyone else. Garrison's already arrested. Adding Whitmore's accusations doesn't change his situation, but it does provide cover for other board members to claim they were following Garrison's recommendations, that they didn't understand the full implications of budget cuts. Maya felt the case slipping away even as it expanded. We need to prove murder. If Whitmore was coerced or killed, that changes everything. Agreed. Work with the police. Find the evidence. Because right now, we have a federal fraud case that just lost a critical witness and gained a suicide note that might actually help the defendants. The rest of the day blurred into frantic coordination. Maya worked with Santos's team, providing financial records that showed who benefited most from Whitmore's silence. Gloria Martinez was brought in to verify documents. Forensic accountants traced money flows between board members and shell companies. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Hendricks had been systematically moving money offshore for 6 months. Small transactions that individually looked innocent, but collectively represented over $3 million being hidden from federal oversight. The transfers accelerated after Garrison's arrest, suggesting someone knew investigations would expand. Yates had hired a crisis management firm 2 weeks ago, before Whitmore's death, before the board meeting where Maya presented evidence. She'd been preparing for public scandal, positioning herself as a reformer who'd been misled by corrupt colleagues, and Whitmore had sent an email to his attorney at 11:47 a.m., 90 minutes before his death. The email subject line read, "Need to discuss immunity agreement options." Santos found Maya in the records room at 8 p.m., both of them running on coffee and adrenaline. We have enough for warrants. Hendricks and Yates are both persons of interest in Whitmore's death. We're bringing them in for questioning tomorrow. They'll lawyer up immediately. Let them. Their alibis only cover the time of death, not conspiracy to commit murder. If they hired someone or coerced Whitmore into suicide, we'll find the evidence. Maya's phone buzzed with yet another message, this one from a number she didn't recognize. You need to stop. People are getting hurt. This is your only warning. She showed it to Santos. Threatening witness intimidation. Add it to the pile. You're not worried? I'm always worried, but I'm more worried about what happens if we stop. Maya looked around the records room, at Gloria's 7 years of documentation, at the evidence of systematic harm caused by greed and negligence. Whitmore is dead. Whether by his own hand or someone else's, he's dead because this system valued profit over accountability. If we stop now, he died for nothing. Santos studied her. You've done this before. Gone after powerful people who don't want to be caught. It's what I do. Most consultants just file reports and move on. I'm not most consultants. They worked until midnight, building timelines and evidence chains and theories of criminal conspiracy. When Maya finally left the hospital, the parking lot was empty except for police vehicles and her rental car. The threat message still glowed on her phone screen. She deleted it, then opened her encrypted communication app and sent a message to her federal handlers. Witness death. Possible murder. Board members fleeing. Need additional protection for remaining witnesses. The response came immediately. Already in motion. Security details assigned to Gloria Martinez and key staff. Stay safe. Maya drove back to her apartment through empty streets, watching her mirrors for tails, noting vehicles that appeared more than once. The threat was real. People with enough resources to orchestrate Whitmore's death would have no hesitation about silencing a federal investigator. But fear was a tool, and Maya had learned long ago not to let it make decisions for her. She was unlocking her apartment door when she noticed it, the faint scratch marks around the lock that hadn't been there this morning. Fresh marks. Recent. Maya drew her service weapon, moving to the side of the doorway. She'd kept her concealed carry authorization active even after transitioning from military to civilian investigation. Moments like this were why. She pushed the door open with her foot, staying behind the frame. Nothing. No movement. No sound except the ambient hum of her refrigerator. But her apartment had been searched. Professionally. Everything returned to almost the exact position she'd left it, but not quite. Books on her shelf rearranged by half an inch. Couch cushions replaced in slightly different angles. Kitchen drawers that she always left precisely aligned now fractionally off. Someone had been looking for something, or sending a message. Maya cleared each room methodically, weapon ready, training overriding the spike of violation and anger. The apartment was empty now, whoever had been here long gone. She holstered her weapon and pulled out her phone, calling Santos. My apartment was searched. Professional job. They wanted me to know they'd been here. Get out. Now. Go to a hotel. I'll send a crime scene team. I need to document. You need to stay alive. These people just killed a board member and made it look like suicide. They won't hesitate to do the same to you. Maya grabbed her go bag, always packed, always ready, and left her apartment without looking back. She drove to a hotel near the federal building, checking in under a false name and paying cash, old intelligence training rising to the surface. In the anonymous hotel room, she finally allowed herself to process. Whitmore was dead. Her apartment had been searched. Witnesses were being threatened. The case was expanding faster than anyone could control. And someone very smart, very connected, and very desperate was trying to stop her. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. She almost didn't answer, but she did. Captain Thornton. The voice was digitally altered, gender indistinguishable. You've been warned. Continue investigating and more people will die. Whitmore was just the beginning. Who is this? Someone who understands what you don't. That some systems are too big to fight. Some people too protected to touch. Walk away while you still can. Or what? Or will make you wish you had. The line went dead. Maya sat in the dark hotel room staring at her phone and made a decision. She wasn't walking away. She was going to burn their entire system to the ground. She started by calling every contact she had in federal law enforcement, waking people at 1 in the morning because urgency didn't respect sleep schedules. Maya needed protection for witnesses, surveillance on remaining board members, and forensic analysis of her apartment break-in, all coordinated before whoever had threatened her could act again. By 3 a.m., she had commitments from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, additional marshals assigned to Gloria Martinez and key hospital staff, and a forensic team processing her apartment for DNA and fingerprints. By 4 a.m., she'd compiled everything she knew about Hendricks and Yates into a comprehensive threat assessment and sent it to every prosecutor, detective, and federal agent working the case. By 5 a.m., she was back at Sterling Grace Hospital. The building never truly slept. Even in the hours before dawn, lights blazed in patient rooms and emergency bays, the machinery of care grinding forward regardless of administrative chaos or criminal investigations. Maya entered through the service entrance, bypassing security cameras she now knew the blind spots for, and made her way to Gloria's basement records kingdom. The older woman was already there, surrounded by file boxes and drinking coffee from a mug that read, "I survived 32 years of hospital administration." "Couldn't sleep either?" Gloria asked without looking up. "Someone searched my apartment last night. Professional job. They're escalating." Gloria's hand stilled over the files. "They killed Whitmore." "Why wouldn't they come after you?" "Because I'm a federal investigator and killing me brings down heat they can't afford. But they'll try other methods, discrediting me, threatening people I care about, finding legal ways to shut down the investigation." "So what do we do?" "We move faster than they can react." Maya pulled out her laptop. "I need access to Hendricks' office, his computer, his files, anything he didn't have time to destroy before resigning." "His office was sealed by federal agents yesterday." "I know, but you have master keys to every office in this hospital, don't you?" Gloria smiled grimly. "Records supervisors know where all the keys are kept. Part of the job description they don't mention in interviews. They moved through the pre-dawn hospital like ghosts, Gloria leading them via service corridors and maintenance access that avoided security stations. The executive floor was empty. The offices dark except for emergency lighting that cast everything in amber shadows. Hendricks' office was sealed with federal evidence tape, but the seal was on the main door. The adjoining conference room had a connecting door that wasn't sealed because the initial warrant hadn't specified it. Gloria unlocked the conference room. Maya slipped through the connecting door into Hendricks' private office, using a pen light to navigate without triggering motion sensors. The office had been partially cleared, obvious files removed, computers seized. But Maya wasn't looking for obvious evidence. She was looking for what people forgot to hide because they thought it was innocuous. She found it in a desk drawer beneath a layer of letterhead and business cards. A burner phone, cheap and disposable, the kind used for communications you didn't want traced. Maya photographed it in place, then carefully extracted it using gloves from her pocket. The phone's call log showed 3 numbers, all called multiple times over the past week. The last call was made at 12:47 p.m. yesterday, exactly 1 hour before Whitmore was found dead. Maya photographed every screen, every number, every timestamp. Then she replaced the phone exactly where she'd found it and slipped back through the conference room. "Find something?" Gloria asked as they retraced their path to the basement. Hendricks made calls from a burner phone the day Whitmore died. One of them was right before the murder. "Can they trace the numbers?" "The FBI can. And once they do, we'll know who Hendricks was coordinating with." Back in the records room, Maya sent the photographs to Walsh with a message. "Found burner phone in Hendricks' office. Call log suggests coordination day of Whitmore's death. Need immediate trace on these numbers." The response came within 10 minutes. "How did you access a sealed crime scene? Does it matter if the evidence is solid? It matters if a defense attorney gets it thrown out for chain of custody violations. Then get a warrant for the phone. I'll tell you exactly where to find it, but move fast. If Hendricks remembers it's there, it'll disappear." Walsh didn't respond immediately, and Maya could imagine the prosecutor weighing prosecutorial ethics against practical necessity. Finally, "I'll have agents there in 30 minutes with a warrant amendment. Don't touch anything else." Maya spent those 30 minutes going through Gloria's documentation again, this time looking for patterns specific to Hendricks. Money flows. Budget approvals. Any decision that showed his direct involvement in systematic fraud. What she found was worse than she'd expected. Hendricks hadn't just approved cost-cutting budgets. He designed them. Every reduction in nursing staff, every elimination of safety protocols, every maintenance deferral had originated in financial models he'd personally created, models that explicitly calculated acceptable mortality rates versus cost savings. He built a spreadsheet that assigned dollar values to human lives, Maya said, staring at the documents. Column A, cost of maintaining adequate nursing ratios. Column B, projected increase in patient mortality. Column C, estimated legal settlements for wrongful death. Column D, net savings even after accounting for lawsuits. Gloria leaned over her shoulder, reading. He gambled that killing patients was cheaper than caring for them properly. And he was right, financially speaking. The settlements were a fraction of what proper staffing would have cost. From a pure profit perspective, letting people die was the smart business decision. That's not smart. That's evil. It's both, which is why it's so hard to prosecute, because the defense will argue he was fulfilling his fiduciary duty to keep the hospital solvent. Maya photographed the spreadsheets. But this proves intent. He knew the decisions would kill people and made them anyway. That's not negligence. That's knowing disregard for human life. Federal agents arrived at 6 a.m., executing the amended warrant with mechanical efficiency. They found the burner phone exactly where Maya had described, bagged it as evidence, and began the process of tracing the calls. By 8 a.m., Maya was in Walsh's office downtown, watching as FBI technicians worked through the phone's data. All three numbers traced to other burner phones, the lead tech reported, but we can triangulate approximate locations based on cell tower data. The first number was used primarily in the Sterling Grace Hospital area. The second number shows activity around Douglas Hendricks's home address. The third, he paused. The third was used near the police evidence facility where Richard Garrison is being held pending trial. Walsh leaned forward. Someone was coordinating with Garrison from outside the facility, and that someone called Hendricks multiple times in the days before Whitmore's death. Maya pulled up the timeline on her laptop. Look at the pattern. Garrison's contact calls Hendricks. 6 hours later, Hendricks calls the hospital number. Next day, Whitmore schedules a meeting with his attorney to discuss immunity. Day after that, Whitmore is dead. You're suggesting Garrison is still running operations from jail. I'm suggesting someone is running operations on his behalf, and Hendricks was taking orders. Maya highlighted the final call. This one, made an hour before Whitmore died. It's to the hospital number. Whoever has that phone was inside Sterling Grace when Whitmore was killed. Walsh grabbed her desk phone. I need visitor logs for Sterling Grace Hospital yesterday between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Every person who entered the building, every staff member on duty, cross-referenced with known associates of Douglas Hendricks and Richard Garrison. The logs arrived within the hour, and buried in the routine traffic of patients, visitors, and deliveries was a name that made Maya's blood run cold. Marcus Webb. The same Marcus Webb who'd posed as an injured patient to spy on Maya. The same Webb who'd been arrested alongside Garrison for obstruction of justice but made bail 2 days ago. He was there, Maya said. Webb was in the hospital the day Whitmore died. Santos arrived at Walsh's office within 20 minutes of her call, bringing the homicide investigation into direct coordination with the federal fraud case. We've been looking for Webb since this morning. He missed his court-ordered check-in. Bail bondsman says he's disappeared. He didn't disappear. He's running. Maya pulled up Webb's financial records that the FBI had already seized as part of the obstruction case. Look at this. Wire transfer yesterday afternoon, 6 hours after Whitmore's death. $50,000 from an offshore account to Webb's personal checking account. He got paid for the hit. Can we trace the offshore account? Working on it. But the transfer timing is damning. Payment made immediately after Whitmore's death, suggesting compensation for services rendered. Santos studied the evidence with a detective's eye for narrative. Webb enters the hospital around noon. He has access because he was a former patient. His face is familiar to staff. He goes to Whitmore's office, maybe claims to have information about the investigation, maybe says he's there on Garrison's behalf, gets Whitmore alone, forces him to type the suicide note, then shoots him and stages the scene. Except Whitmore fought back, Maya added. The defensive wounds suggest he resisted. which means there might be Webb's DNA under Whitmore's fingernails or on his clothing. We're still processing forensic evidence from the scene. Results won't be back for another day at least. We don't have a day. Webb knows we're closing in. Every hour that passes, he gets further away. Walsh made another call, this one to the U.S. Marshals Service. I need a fugitive warrant for Marcus Webb. Federal obstruction charges plus material witness in a homicide investigation. Consider him armed and dangerous. While Walsh coordinated the manhunt, Maya returned to Sterling Grace with Santos, this time to interview staff who'd been on duty when Whitmore died. Someone must have seen Webb, must have noticed him near the executive offices, must have some piece of information that could confirm his presence at the crime scene. They found that witness in an unexpected place, the hospital's janitorial staff. Carlos Mendez was a night custodian who'd been pulling a double shift to cover for sick colleagues. He'd been cleaning the executive floor around 1 p.m. when he noticed a man he didn't recognize leaving Whitmore's office in a hurry. I thought maybe he was upset about something, Carlos explained in halting English, clearly nervous about talking to police. He looked angry, stressed, and he had something red on his sleeve like he'd spilled something. Santos showed him a photograph. Is this the man? Carlos studied it carefully. Yes, that's him. I remember because he looked at me like he was deciding something. Then he just walked past and took the stairs instead of the elevator. Did you report this to anyone? I told my supervisor, but she said lots of people use the stairs, that it wasn't important. I didn't know someone had died until later. The substance on his sleeve, are you sure it was red? It looked like blood, but I thought maybe he had a nosebleed or something. I didn't think... Carlos's face crumpled. I should have said something right away. Maya touched his shoulder gently. You're saying something now. That's what matters. They took Carlos's formal statement, complete with timeline and description. Combined with the visitor logs showing Webb's presence and the financial transfer showing payment, they had enough circumstantial evidence to build a compelling case. But Webb was still in the wind. The break came at 2 p.m. from an unexpected source, Patricia Yates. The former head of community relations arrived at the federal building flanked by 3 lawyers requesting an emergency meeting with prosecutors. She looked diminished somehow, her perfect composure cracked around the edges. Walsh assembled the team in a conference room, Maya, Santos, 2 FBI agents, and a court reporter. Yates's lead attorney laid out the terms. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. My client has information regarding the murder of James Whitmore and the ongoing criminal conspiracy at Sterling Grace Hospital, the attorney said. She's prepared to testify against Douglas Hendricks, Marcus Webb, and Richard Garrison. In exchange, we're requesting immunity from all charges related to the hospital fraud investigation. Walsh's expression was carved from ice. Your client approved budgets that killed patients. She facilitated systematic fraud. She doesn't get immunity, she gets consideration for cooperation. Without her testimony, you can't prove conspiracy to commit murder. We'll prove it anyway, just takes longer. The attorney leaned forward. Ms. Yates can provide direct evidence of Hendricks planning Whitmore's murder. She was in the room when it was discussed. She heard the phone call ordering Webb to handle the problem. She can testify that Garrison has been directing operations from jail through intermediaries. The room went silent. This was the break they needed, but it came wrapped in moral complexity. Yates had enabled everything, the fraud, the negligence, the culture of cruelty that defined Sterling Grace under Garrison's leadership. Giving her immunity meant letting her escape justice for those crimes, but it also meant guaranteeing convictions for murder. Walsh looked at Maya. Your opinion? I want them all in prison, but if we have to choose between getting Yates and getting the people who ordered a murder, I'll take the murderers. Agreed. Walsh turned back to the attorneys. Here's the deal. Ms. Yates pleads guilty to 1 count of healthcare fraud, receives probation with community service. In exchange, she provides complete cooperation, testimony, documents, communications, everything. Any lie, any omission, any attempt to minimize her own involvement, and the immunity disappears. Those are the terms. The lawyers huddled with Yates, whispering urgently. Finally, she nodded. We accept. What followed was 8 hours of testimony that dismantled the last pretense of deniability. Yates described how Garrison had recruited Hendricks years ago, how they'd built the fraud scheme together, how board meetings were choreographed to provide plausible deniability while decisions were actually made in private. She confirmed that Hendricks had panicked after Maya's investigation revealed the scope of the fraud, that he'd contacted Garrison in jail through Webb, that Garrison had suggested eliminating Whitmore before he could testify. Hendricks didn't want to do it, Yates said, her voice flat and exhausted. He argued that killing a board member would bring too much attention, but Garrison said it was the only way to control the narrative, that a suicide note would limit exposure while eliminating a weak link. When did this conversation occur? Walsh asked. 3 days before Whitmore died. Hendricks called me afterward, told me what Garrison wanted. I should have gone to the police. I should have... She stopped, seeming to realize that this testimony was condemning her as much as the others. I thought if I just resigned quietly, I could walk away. But Whitmore's death changed everything. Did Hendricks tell you explicitly that he'd ordered Webb to kill Whitmore? Not explicitly, but he called me after it happened and said, "It's done, the problem is handled." And when I asked what he meant, he said I didn't want to know the details. Santos leaned forward. Where is Webb now? I don't know. Hendricks said Webb was leaving the country, that he'd be in Mexico or South America by the time anyone connected him to Whitmore's death. What about Hendricks? Where's he planning to go? Yates hesitated, and her lawyer whispered something. She nodded. He has a place in the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts under his wife's name. He's been moving money there for months, preparing to disappear if the investigation expanded. Walsh made a call to the FBI's International Division. Within 30 minutes, they had alerts out to every airport, border crossing, and port on the southern coast. Hendricks' passport was flagged. His bank accounts were frozen. His escape routes were being systematically closed. But the man himself was already gone. He'd left his house that morning before the burner phone was discovered, before Yates had turned state's evidence, before the walls had closed in completely. He'd had just enough warning to run. The manhunt went national. FBI, U.S. Marshals, local police, everyone mobilized to find a CFO turned fugitive who'd approved budgets that killed patients and ordered a murder to cover his crimes. Maya worked through the night with Santos and the FBI, tracking Hendricks's movements through credit card transactions, cell phone pings, and traffic cameras. They traced him to a private airfield 60 miles outside Riverside, where a chartered plane had filed a flight plan to Mexico City. But when federal agents raided the airfield, the plane was gone. Departed 2 hours before the warrant was issued, just barely ahead of the lockdown. He's in Mexico, Santos said, staring at radar data showing the plane's trajectory, beyond our immediate jurisdiction. Not beyond extradition, Walsh countered. Mexico has treaties. We'll get him back. How long does that take? Months? Maybe a year if his lawyers are good. Maya felt the case slipping through jurisdictional cracks and bureaucratic delays. What about Webb? Any hits on his location? Nothing yet, but we've got his face plastered everywhere. Airports, border crossings, bus stations. Someone will spot him. That someone turned out to be a night clerk at a motel in El Paso, Texas, 3 miles from the Mexican border. Webb had checked in using a fake ID, but the clerk recognized him from news coverage and called police. Local SWAT surrounded the motel at 4 a.m. Webb barricaded himself in the room, shouting that he wouldn't be taken alive, that Garrison had promised to protect him. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Negotiators tried to talk him down while Maya listened via phone patch, hearing the desperation in Webb's voice as he realized that Garrison's promises were empty, that he'd been used and abandoned. Finally, as dawn broke, Webb emerged with his hands up. He was arrested, extradited back to Riverside, and placed in isolation pending charges. By noon, his lawyers were already negotiating a cooperation deal, Webb's testimony against Garrison and Hendricks in exchange for a reduced sentence. The dominoes were falling faster now. Webb's testimony provided the final pieces. He described how Garrison had recruited him years ago for various problem-solving tasks, intimidating staff, destroying documents, and eventually murder. He confirmed that Garrison had directed Whitmore's killing from jail, using Webb as the instrument and Hendricks as the coordinator. With Webb and Yates both cooperating, federal prosecutors had enough to charge Garrison with conspiracy to commit murder in addition to the fraud charges. Hendricks, still in Mexico, was charged in absentia with first-degree murder, conspiracy, an interstate flight to avoid prosecution. The case was no longer just about healthcare fraud. It was about a systematic criminal enterprise that had operated under the cover of hospital administration. Maya watched the press conference from Walsh's office as the U.S. attorney announced the charges. Cameras flashed as prosecutors detailed the conspiracy, the murder, the fraud scheme that had operated for nearly a decade. "Justice is slow," Walsh said, standing beside her, "but it's coming." What about the patients who died because of Hendrix's budgets? What about the families who'll never get their loved ones back? Civil suits are already being filed. Sterling Grace's insurance carriers will settle. They have no choice with this much documented negligence. The families will get compensation. Money doesn't replace people. No, but it acknowledges that their deaths mattered, that someone is being held accountable. Walsh turned to face her. "You did this. You exposed a system designed to hide crimes, and you didn't stop even when they threatened you. That takes courage most people don't have." Maya thought about the bench where she'd waited for 6 hours, about Garrison's certainty that she was powerless, about the moment she'd decided to fight back instead of accept dismissal. "I just did my job." Your job was to investigate fraud. You prevented more murders, protected witnesses, and dismantled a criminal conspiracy. That's beyond any job description. Rebecca Chen found them an hour later with news from Sterling Grace. The interim board voted unanimously to maintain federal oversight for the next 3 years. They're implementing new protocols for budget approval, hiring an independent ethics officer, and creating a staff oversight committee with actual authority. "Will it work?" Maya asked. "Depends on whether the next generation of administrators learns from this or finds new ways to prioritize profit." Chen smiled. "But at least we're trying, and the staff knows they can fight back now. That changes the culture." Maya returned to Sterling Grace that evening, walking through corridors that felt different now. Staff made eye contact. Nurses smiled. The atmosphere of fear that had permeated everything was lifting, replaced by cautious hope. She found Denise in the trauma unit, supervising a team of new hires, positions that had been frozen for years suddenly approved as the Federal Oversight Committee restructured budgets. "Heard Hendrix is running around Mexico like a scared rat," Denise said. "Can't say I'm sorry. They'll get him eventually. Extradition takes time, but it's inevitable." "And Garrison?" "Trial starts in 3 months. With Webb and Yates testifying, the prosecution is confident." Denise nodded slowly. "So it's really over." "The criminal cases are just beginning, but the part where they had power here, where they could hurt people without consequences, that's over. Because of you. Because of everyone who documented, who witnessed, who refused to forget even when it seemed hopeless." Maya gestured at the bustling trauma unit, at nurses working with adequate staffing for the first time in years. This is what was always possible. They just convinced everyone it wasn't. Her phone buzzed with a call from Santos. "We found something in Whitmore's office. Hidden camera he installed himself, pointed at his desk. The footage shows everything." Maya's pulse quickened. "Everything?" "Webb forcing him to type the suicide note, the struggle, the murder, all of it on video. Whitmore must have installed it as insurance, in case the board turned on him. He wanted evidence of who came into his office and what was discussed." "Does the footage show Webb clearly?" "Crystal clear. Face, voice, even the gun. Defense attorneys can't claim mistaken identity or coerced confession. The murder is documented, start to finish. This was it. The unshakable evidence that would guarantee convictions, that would close every loophole and eliminate every escape route. Send it to Walsh immediately." "Already done. She's calling a press conference for tomorrow morning. Wants you there." Maya ended the call and stood in the trauma unit, watching nurses save lives with the resources they should have had all along. Justice was slow and imperfect and complicated by jurisdictional boundaries and legal procedures. But it was coming, and when it arrived, it would be final. Her phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number, but this time the message was different. "You win. Garrison wants to make a deal." Maya stared at the message, then forwarded it to Walsh without responding. Within minutes, Walsh called back. "Garrison's attorneys just contacted me. He's willing to plead guilty to all charges, provide complete cooperation, in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table for the murder conspiracy charge. Does Texas have the death penalty for conspiracy? Technically, if it can be proven he directed a murder from jail as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise. It's a stretch, but his lawyers know we have Webb's testimony and now Whitmore's video. Garrison sees the walls closing and he's trying to negotiate before trial. What are you going to do? Take the deal. Life in prison without parole is justice enough, and his cooperation will help us prosecute remaining co-conspirators, middle managers who facilitated the fraud, suppliers who provided kickbacks, politicians who took bribes to ignore violations. So he gets to avoid death row by betraying everyone else. He gets to spend the rest of his life in a cell, knowing that his empire collapsed, his reputation is destroyed, and everyone he corrupted is going to prison with him. Walsh paused. Sometimes the best revenge is watching them live with the consequences. The next morning, Maya stood behind the podium as Walsh announced the plea agreement to a room full of reporters. Cameras flashed. Questions erupted. The story that had started with a woman on a bench waiting to be dismissed had become national news. Former hospital CEO to plead guilty in murder-for-hire conspiracy. Sterling Grace scandal expands multiple arrests, expected federal investigation uncovers decade of healthcare fraud. Maya didn't speak at the press conference. She stood in the background while prosecutors took credit and politicians promised reform. That was fine. She'd never done this for recognition. But afterward, as reporters dispersed and the cameras packed up, a young journalist approached her. "Captain Thornton, I'm writing a feature about how this case developed. Can I ask you a few questions?" "I'm not authorized to comment on ongoing investigations." "Not about the legal case. About you. About how you went from being fired on your first day to bringing down an entire criminal conspiracy." Maya considered deflecting, maintaining the low profile that had served her well. But maybe this once the story deserved to be told. "I sat on a bench for 6 hours," she said, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for someone to care that I existed. "And I realized that power isn't given, it's taken, not through violence or intimidation, but through refusing to accept that some people get to decide who matters and who doesn't." The journalist scribbled notes. "What would you say to other whistleblowers? People who see wrongdoing but are afraid to report it? That silence protects the guilty, that systems only change when people refuse to accept them, that being afraid is normal, but being paralyzed by fear is a choice." Maya thought of Gloria documenting for 7 years, of Denise speaking up despite threats, of Park finding his courage, and that you're not alone. Even when it feels that way, you're not alone. The interview appeared 3 days later in a national newspaper. Maya read it once, then filed it away with the other documentation of a case that had consumed months of her life. She was packing her hotel room, preparing to move on to the next investigation, when Chen called one final time. "The staff wants to thank you," Chen said. "We're having a reception tomorrow evening. Nothing formal, just an opportunity for people to express gratitude." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not necessary, but deserved." Maya almost declined. She preferred to leave quietly, to move on without ceremony or sentiment. But something made her reconsider, the memory of Tessa crying because she'd thought justice was impossible, of Gloria spending 7 years documenting abuses that no one saw, of all the healthcare workers who'd been ground down by a system designed to break them. What time? The hospital cafeteria had been transformed. Someone had brought decorations. Someone else had arranged food that wasn't the usual terrible coffee and vending machine sandwiches. Staff from every department filled the space: nurses, doctors, custodians, administrative assistants, everyone who'd survived years of Garrison's regime. Maya arrived to applause. It made her uncomfortable, this recognition, this attention. She'd spent her career in shadows, operating where public acknowledgement was liability rather than reward. But these people needed this moment, needed to see that fighting back was possible, that justice existed even when it took months to arrive. Denise spoke first, her voice carrying across the crowded cafeteria. "Most of you know the official story. Federal investigator goes undercover, exposes corruption, brings down powerful executives, but I want you to know what that looked like from inside the hospital." She described the years of fear, the staff meetings where Garrison threatened terminations, The budget cuts that forced impossible choices between patient safety and keeping your job. She described watching good nurses quit, watching doctors burn out, watching a culture of excellence corrode into a culture of survival. Then Captain Thornton showed up. She sat on a bench for 6 hours because Garrison wanted to demonstrate his power. She got fired on her second shift because she wouldn't stay silent. She got threatened. Her apartment was searched. People tried to kill her. Denise's eyes found Maya in the crowd. And she didn't quit. She didn't accept that some people are too powerful to fight. She just kept going until the truth couldn't be buried anymore. More applause. Maya nodded acknowledgement, still uncomfortable but understanding the necessity. Tessa spoke next, talking about being a new nurse in an impossible environment, about learning to normalize understaffing and missing equipment, because that's just how things were. Captain Thornton showed me that accepting broken systems makes you complicit in their damage, that speaking up isn't naive, it's necessary. Dr. Park described the pressure to remain silent, to prioritize career over conscience, to accept that challenging authority meant professional suicide. I failed that test the first time. When she needed support, I stepped back. I'll regret that forever. But she kept fighting anyway, and now the rest of us know we can too. Gloria was the last to speak. She stood slowly, her age showing in the careful movement, but her voice was strong. I documented abuse for 7 years. Filed reports that disappeared. Kept records nobody wanted. And I stopped believing it mattered, stopped believing anyone would care. She looked at Maya. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for showing that one person with courage can make a difference, even against systems designed to crush anyone who challenges them. The staff presented her with a plaque in recognition of extraordinary courage and dedication to justice, and Maya accepted it with words that felt inadequate to the moment. I didn't do this alone. Gloria kept records. Denise documented incidents. Staff members provided testimony despite threats. This was never about one person. It was about everyone who refused to forget, who refused to accept that people dying for profit was just the cost of doing business. She looked around at faces that had lived through years of institutional cruelty. You survived. You witnessed. You remembered. And when the opportunity came, you spoke up. That's the real courage. She stayed for an hour, accepting gratitude and answering questions and listening to stories of what the hospital was becoming now that federal oversight had restructured everything. New safety protocols, adequate staffing, equipment that actually worked, the basic fundamentals of patient care that should never have been negotiable. As the reception wound down, Maya found herself alone with Chen in the now quiet cafeteria. "What's next for you?" Chen asked. "Another hospital, another investigation. There's always another case." "You could stay. Help build this place properly. Make sure the changes stick." Maya considered it. The appeal of seeing something through to completion, of building instead of just exposing. But that wasn't who she was. She was the person who forced open doors, who exposed what was hidden, who made space for others to create change. You don't need me for that. You need people like Denise who understand this hospital's culture. People like Park, who are willing to speak up now. People like Gloria, who won't let history be rewritten. And you? I'm better at starting fights than finishing them. Maya smiled. But I'll make sure there are people watching, people who will call me if things start sliding backward. Systems don't stay fixed without vigilance. She left Sterling Grace Hospital for the last time as the sun set over Riverside, the building's windows glowing with the light of continued care. Behind her were criminal cases that would take years to fully resolve, civil suits that would compensate families for negligence, and a restructured institution that might actually serve its community the way it always should have. Ahead was another investigation, another broken system, another group of executives who believed they were untouchable. Maya drove into the gathering darkness, her phone already showing messages about the next case, a hospital in the northern part of the state, suspicious mortality rates, staff too afraid to report. The work never ended, but neither did the possibility that someone would fight back, would refuse to accept that power meant impunity. And somewhere, on some bench in some hospital corridor, someone was waiting to be dismissed, to be ignored, to be told they didn't matter. Maya hoped they'd choose to fight instead. She hoped they'd prove, once again, that justice was possible when people refused to give up. Her phone rang. Walsh. Garrison's plea hearing is scheduled for next week. Thought you'd want to know. I'll be there. It's just a formality. He's pleading guilty. No drama. I know, but he should see me, should remember the person he tried to dismiss. Walsh understood. Front row is reserved for law enforcement. I'll make sure you have a seat. Maya ended the call and kept driving, the miles disappearing beneath her wheels, another hospital waiting ahead. But first, she had one final appointment with Richard Garrison, in a courtroom where his power would finally, formally, publicly end. The federal courthouse in Riverside was built to intimidate. All marble columns and vaulted ceilings, the architecture of judgment rendered in stone and glass. Maya arrived 30 minutes before the hearing, passing through security with her credentials, nodding at marshals who'd worked the Sterling Grace case. The courtroom was already filling. Victims' families occupied the left side, their faces carrying the weight of losses that no verdict could repair. Media packed the back rows, cameras prohibited, but notebooks ready to document the fall of a man who'd once controlled healthcare for 500,000 people. Maya took her seat in the front row, law enforcement section, directly in Garrison's line of sight. He entered in shackles, his expensive suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller somehow, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. His lawyers flanked him, 3 of them, all looking resigned to a proceeding that was formality rather than fight. Garrison's eyes swept the courtroom and found Maya immediately. For a long moment they stared at each other across the space between defendant and witness, and she watched recognition dawn on his face. Not just identification, but understanding, that the woman he dismissed, fired, threatened was the architect of his destruction. His expression hardened into hatred so pure it was almost physical. Maya smiled, not gloating, just acknowledgement that she'd promised him consequences and delivered them. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of stern competence that came from decades adjudicating human cruelty. This court is in session, United States versus Richard Garrison. I understand we're here for a change of plea. Garrison's lead attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client wishes to enter a guilty plea to all charges in exchange for life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Mr. Garrison, you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to trial, that you're admitting to conspiracy to commit murder, healthcare fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice? Garrison stood slowly, chains rattling. I understand. And you're entering this plea voluntarily, without coercion. A pause. His jaw tightened. Yes. Very well. The court accepts your plea. Before sentencing, I'll hear from the prosecution regarding the scope of your crimes, and I'll allow victims to make impact statements. Walsh stood, her presentation crisp and devastating. She outlined the fraud scheme, 8 years of systematic theft, over $40 million diverted through shell companies and phantom suppliers. She detailed the cost-cutting measures that killed patients. 17 confirmed deaths directly attributable to understaffing, missing equipment, or deferred maintenance. She described the murder of James Whitmore, the conspiracy involving Hendricks and Webb, the threats against witnesses and investigators. Your Honor, Richard Garrison didn't just steal money, he weaponized healthcare, turning an institution meant to save lives into a mechanism for extracting profit while patients died. He ordered a murder to silence a potential witness. He threatened federal investigators. And when finally caught, he attempted to flee jurisdiction. Walsh pulled up photographs on the courtroom screens, images of patients who'd died, staff members who'd been fired for speaking up, the spreadsheet where Hendricks had calculated acceptable mortality rates versus cost savings. This wasn't negligence. This was calculated cruelty. And the defendant showed no remorse until facing a potential death sentence. The judge studied the evidence with an expression that revealed nothing. Then she turned to the defense. Does your client wish to make a statement? Garrison's lawyers huddled with him, whispering urgently. Finally, he stood. I made decisions I believed were necessary to keep Sterling Grace operational in a challenging healthcare environment. Costs were rising, reimbursements falling. I did what I thought I had to do to keep the doors open. His voice was steady, rehearsed. I regret that people were harmed. That was never my intention. You regret being caught, Maya said quietly, but her voice carried in the courtroom's acoustic design. The judge's gavel cracked. Captain Thornton, you're not authorized to speak unless called as a witness. My apologies, Your Honor. But Garrison had heard her, his composure cracked, anger bleeding through. You destroyed everything I built. Years of work. An entire hospital system. I exposed what you built, Maya interrupted, standing now despite protocol. A system where patients died because you valued profit over people, where staff were threatened into silence, where healthcare became a criminal enterprise. Captain Thornton, sit down, the judge ordered. Your Honor, if I may. This man had me wait 6 hours on a bench like I didn't exist. He fired me for refusing to participate in his fraud. He threatened my life and the lives of witnesses. I've earned the right to speak. The judge regarded her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Proceed, briefly. Maya turned to face Garrison directly. You thought you were untouchable, that your power, your connections, your resources would protect you from consequences. You looked at people like me, people who actually care about patients, and saw obstacles to be removed, problems to be handled. She gestured at the families in the gallery. These people lost mothers, fathers, children, because you decided their lives were worth less than your profit margins. Staff members lost careers because they tried to stop you. An entire institution was corrupted because you believed rules didn't apply to you. Garrison's hands were shaking now, rage or fear or both. You self-righteous... I'm not righteous. I'm just someone who refused to accept that men like you get to decide who matters. And now you'll spend the rest of your life in prison knowing that your empire collapsed because you underestimated a woman you tried to dismiss. Maya sat back down. That's justice. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then the judge spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Garrison, I've presided over many cases in my career. I've seen corruption, violence, human cruelty in its many forms. But I've rarely seen such calculated disregard for human life dressed up as business necessity. She leaned forward. You didn't make difficult choices in a challenging environment. You chose profit over patience. You chose intimidation over accountability. You chose murder over justice. She opened the sentencing document. You're hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole on the conspiracy to commit murder charge. Additionally, 25 years on each count of healthcare fraud to run consecutively, 20 years on each wire fraud count consecutive, 10 years on obstruction consecutive. The numbers added up to more than any human lifespan. Garrison was going to die in prison, and the judge was making sure there was no legal mechanism for early release. Furthermore, I'm ordering full restitution to all victims and their families. Your assets, all of them, will be liquidated to pay for the damage you caused. You'll leave this courtroom with nothing but the consequences of your actions. She brought down the gavel with finality that echoed through the chamber. Garrison stood motionless as marshals approached to return him to custody. His lawyers began gathering papers with the mechanical efficiency of people already calculating their billable hours on the appeal they knew would fail. As marshals led him toward the door, Garrison stopped beside Maya's row. The guards allowed him one moment. Whether compassion or curiosity, Maya couldn't tell. This doesn't change anything, he said, his voice low and venomous. There are 100 hospitals like Sterling Grace, 1,000 executives making the same decisions I made. You stopped me, but the system continues. You didn't win anything. Maya met his eyes without flinching. I won you. And when the next Richard Garrison starts cutting corners and killing patients, there'll be someone like me waiting to stop them too. Maybe they'll remember what happened to you and choose differently. Or maybe they won't, and they'll end up in the cell next to yours. You're naive. I'm persistent. There's a difference. The marshals pulled him away, and Maya watched as Richard Garrison disappeared through the secured door that would lead to a transport vehicle, a prison cell, and decades of nothing but time to contemplate how catastrophically he'd miscalculated. The courtroom slowly emptied. Families lingered, some crying, others simply staring at the space where Garrison had stood, as if witnessing could somehow heal what had been broken. Walsh found Maya in the corridor outside. That was out of line, speaking without authorization. I know. The judge could have held you in contempt. But she didn't. Walsh smiled despite herself. No, she didn't, because what you said needed to be said. She handed Maya a folder. Victim Compensation Fund is being established. 40 million in seized assets plus insurance settlements. Families will receive payment within 6 months. It won't bring anyone back. No. But it acknowledges that their deaths mattered, that someone is being held accountable. Walsh paused. What about you? Where do you go from here? Maya thought about the message on her phone, the next investigation waiting, the next hospital where executives had convinced themselves that profit justified negligence. There's a facility in the northern part of the state. Suspicious mortality rates. Staff reporting intimidation. Sounds familiar? You're going to do this again. Until I can't anymore. Or until hospitals stop needing investigators because they actually operate with integrity. Maya shrugged. Whichever comes first. The odds of changing an entire industry are terrible. I know. But the odds of convicting Garrison were terrible too, 6 months ago when I was sitting on a bench being told to wait. Maya smiled. I'm comfortable with terrible odds. She left the courthouse and drove north, back to Sterling Grace one final time to collect the last of her documentation and close out the consulting contract with Chen. The hospital felt different now, lighter somehow, as if removing Garrison's presence had allowed the building itself to breathe. Staff moved with purpose instead of fear. Patient rooms had adequate supplies. The trauma unit operated with proper staffing ratios for the first time in years. Chen was in her temporary office, surrounded by reorganization plans and budget proposals that prioritized care over cost-cutting. I heard about the sentencing. Life without parole. Plus centuries of consecutive sentences, just to be thorough. Good. Chen set down her pen. I wanted to talk to you about something. The board is creating a permanent oversight position, someone to monitor operations, review budgets, ensure we never slide back into the patterns that enabled Garrison. I'd like you to consider taking it. Maya had expected this offer. I appreciate it, but permanent positions aren't my strength. I'm better at exposing problems than managing solutions. Even if it meant protecting everything you've accomplished here, making sure the changes stick? Especially then. Because if I stay, I become part of the system I was brought in to challenge. The staff needs to know they can hold leadership accountable without outside intervention. They need to trust their own power. Maya pulled out a business card, writing a number on the back. But this is my direct line. If things start deteriorating, if you see warning signs that another Garrison is taking root, call me. I'll come back. Chen accepted the card like a talisman. You changed this place, not just by removing Garrison, but by showing people that fighting back is possible. People always had that power, they just needed to see someone use it. Maya's final stop was the records room, where Gloria was training her replacement, a young man fresh from library science school, who looked slightly overwhelmed by the scope of institutional memory he was inheriting. Captain Thornton. Gloria stood, gesturing at her successor. This is Marcus. I'm teaching him which files matter and which ones are just bureaucratic decoration. The distinction is important, Maya said, shaking Marcus's hand. Sometimes the truth lives in the files people forget to destroy. After Marcus returned to his cataloging, Gloria walked Maya to the door. I'm retiring next month. 32 years is enough. You've earned it. Have I? Gloria's expression was complex. I documented abuse for 7 years before you arrived. 7 years of watching people suffer while I made spreadsheets and filed reports that nobody read. Sometimes I wonder if I was brave or just cowardly, keeping records instead of actually fighting. You preserved the evidence that brought Garrison down. Without your documentation, he might have beaten the charges. That's not cowardice. That's strategic patience. Strategic patience, Gloria tested the phrase. I like that better than too scared to act. Fear doesn't disqualify courage. It just makes courage more expensive. Maya squeezed her shoulder gently. Enjoy retirement. You've earned every day of it. She walked out through the main entrance one last time, past the donor wall that would soon be revised to remove Garrison's name, past the promises of excellence that were finally being kept. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Santos. Hendricks was arrested in Mexico City this morning. Mexican federal police picked him up at a luxury resort. He's fighting extradition, but it's a formality. He'll be back in the U.S. within 3 months. What about Webb? Trial starts in 6 weeks. He's still trying to negotiate a better deal, but with Whitmore's video footage and Yates's testimony, his lawyers know he's finished. Best case scenario, he gets life with possibility of parole after 30 years. So everyone faces consequences. Everyone except the middle managers who enabled it all. We're still building cases against department heads who falsified records, suppliers who paid kickbacks, politicians who took bribes. That'll take years. But it's happening. It's happening. Because you didn't stop when they fired you, didn't back down when they threatened you, didn't accept that some people are above accountability. Maya ended the call and sat in her car, engine idling, looking at the hospital that had transformed from crime scene to cautionary tale to potential model for reform. Her phone showed 17 new messages, other investigators requesting consultation on similar cases, journalists wanting interviews, healthcare reform advocates seeking her support for legislative changes. She ignored them all and opened a different message, this one from Dr. Park. We're organizing a national coalition of healthcare workers committed to transparency and accountability, using what happened here as a template for identifying and reporting systematic fraud. Would you be willing to speak at our first conference? Maya typed back, "Send me the details, I'll be there." Because this was how change actually happened, not through one dramatic case, not through one executive going to prison, but through thousands of small acts of courage by people who refused to accept that broken systems were inevitable. She drove north as afternoon faded into evening, the landscape shifting from city to countryside, from the known to the uncertain. The next investigation waited. New executives, same patterns, different victims who deserved someone willing to fight for them. Her phone rang one more time. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Captain Thornton?" A woman's voice, young and frightened. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a nurse at Mercy Regional Hospital. I've been documenting safety violations for 6 months, and I don't know what to do. My supervisor says if I report anything, I'll be fired and blacklisted." Maya pulled over, giving the call her full attention. "Tell me everything." Sarah's story poured out. Understaffing, missing equipment, administrators who prioritize budget over patients, staff too terrified to speak up. The same story Maya had heard at Sterling Grace, at a dozen hospitals before that, at countless institutions where profit corrupted care. "I saw the news about what you did in Riverside," Sarah said, "how you exposed the fraud and got justice for patients. I know it's probably impossible, but I was hoping maybe you could help us too." Maya thought about Garrison in his cell, about Hendricks awaiting extradition, about the victims whose deaths would be acknowledged and compensated. She thought about Gloria's 7 years of documentation, about Denise's refusal to forget, about every person who'd chosen courage despite fear. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. What you've been doing, documenting violations, that's exactly right. Keep doing it. Save everything. And I need you to find other staff members who are willing to witness. You can't do this alone." "But what if they fire me? What if I lose my nursing license?" "They might. Fighting back is expensive. But silence is more expensive. It costs lives." Maya paused, letting the weight settle. "I can't promise you'll be protected. I can't promise there won't be consequences. But I can promise that if you're willing to fight, you won't fight alone. And I can promise that institutions like yours only change when people like you refuse to accept them." Silence on the line, then, "Will you come? Will you investigate?" "I'll start tomorrow. Send me everything you have, documentation, witness names, incident reports. I'll review it and let you know what we're working with." "Thank you. God, thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. They'll threaten you, try to discredit you, maybe try to destroy your career. You need to be sure you're ready for that." "I'm ready. I've been ready since I watched a patient die because we didn't have enough nurses on the floor to respond to her call light. I'm done being silent." Maya ended the call and sat in the gathering darkness, watching stars emerge in the sky above empty farmland. Somewhere ahead was another hospital, another garrison, another system designed to protect the guilty and silence the brave. But somewhere ahead was also Sarah, documenting and waiting and hoping that courage was possible. Maya pulled back onto the highway and drove toward that hope. Her phone buzzed with the documentation Sarah had promised, 73 pages of incident reports, budget memos, and staffing schedules that told the same story Sterling Grace had told. Another institution where executives had calculated that killing patients was cheaper than caring for them properly. She'd stop at a motel in a few hours, review the evidence, and begin planning her approach. She'd find a way to get hired, to observe, to document. She'd identify the weak points in their defenses, the staff members willing to testify, the financial trails that would prove systematic fraud, and eventually she'd sit across from some new executive in some new office and watch their certainty crumble as they realized that power wasn't permanent, that accountability was possible, that justice sometimes arrived in the form of a woman they'd tried to dismiss. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark and full of possibility. Maya drove through the night, her phone full of evidence, her purpose renewed, her conviction unshaken that systems only stayed broken when people accepted them as inevitable. She'd accepted nothing, and she'd proved, at Sterling Grace, in federal court, in the collapse of executives who'd believed themselves untouchable, that refusal was its own kind of power. The kind that couldn't be fired, threatened, or silenced. The kind that turned benches into battlegrounds and dismissal into demolition. The kind that remembered every victim, documented every crime, and pursued justice with the patience of someone who understood that right didn't always win quickly, but could win eventually if someone refused to quit. Maya was that someone. And ahead, in hospitals she hadn't investigated yet, in corridors where staff still waited to be heard, in patient rooms where lives depended on someone fighting for them. Other someones were waiting to be that person too, waiting for proof that courage was possible, waiting for evidence that systems could change, waiting for someone to show them how. Maya drove toward that waiting, toward the next fight, toward the certainty that as long as people valued profit over patience, someone needed to value justice more than comfort. She was comfortable being that someone. She'd proven it on a bench, in a courtroom, in the collapse of an empire built on cruelty. And she'd prove it again. As many times as it took, for as long as it mattered, which meant forever. The road curved ahead into darkness, and Maya followed it without hesitation, carrying evidence of crimes yet to be prosecuted and hope for changes yet to be won. Behind her, Garrison counted days in a cell that would be his world until death. Behind her, Sterling Grace Hospital operated with integrity for the first time in a decade. Behind her, families received acknowledgement that their losses mattered, that someone had been held accountable. And ahead, Sarah waited in a hospital where patients were dying and staff were silent and executives believed they were safe from consequences. They were wrong. Maya would prove it, the same way she always did, by refusing to accept that power meant impunity, by transforming dismissal into determination, by remembering that justice wasn't a destination, it was a practice, repeated daily by people who refused to quit. She drove through the night toward morning, toward the next hospital, toward the next fight in a war that never ended but could be won in pieces, one case at a time, one executive at a time, one life saved at a time. And somewhere, in a prison cell in Riverside, Richard Garrison stared at walls and remembered a woman on a bench who he'd tried to make invisible, the woman who'd made him disappear instead. That was justice, and it was just beginning.